Chapter 1142. Bojio wasn't prepared. By the time she reacted, she had already knocked into his straight back. His light breath was mixed with the scent of the sun. It seemed to be able to seep into her. The only flaw was the slight pain on the tip of her nose. There wasn't enough oxygen. Chinemo tilted his head and reached out to support her. His gaze was calm as he took the water prepared by the soldier beside him and placed it by the youngster's lips. Bojio drank 2 mouthfuls, her breathing stabilizing. Chinemo asked, "Is there a point in following me?" "MMH, it's very interesting." Bojio smiled mischievously. Chinemo glanced at the person in front of him, his tone faint. "I remember saying that you have 1 day to leave." "Major General, I passed all the tests and have the right to stay." Bojio had already prepared her excuse. Chinemo laughed, a little mocking. "Passed all the tests? You don't even know how to fold your blanket." Bojio. She was speechless, his words were too harsh. A few seconds of silence ensued. Chinemo tilted his head, reaching out for the white towel. Then he pulled the youngster towards him. Bojio was still wondering what the Almighty was doing. The white towel touched her forehead. He was helping her wipe her sweat. Bojio lifted her face even higher and narrowed her eyes in enjoyment. Her face was so handsome and beautiful. Chinemo regretted his actions. Why did he subconsciously pull this guy over to wipe her sweat? The first thing he saw was her face that was as black as coal. Even so, the side of her face was illuminated by the light. His lips, which were stained with water, seemed to be coated with a layer of gloss. It was hard for anyone to shift their gaze away after looking at it. Chinmo's eyes deepened, and after a few seconds he removed the white towel. Bojio realized that there was no one to wipe her sweat. She took 2 steps forward. "Go pack your things." Chinmo didn't even turn his head. His voice was still calm as he said these few words to her. Bojio arched a brow, leaning to the side. "If I fold the blanket properly, I will pass the test. I won't pack my things." Chinemo paused and looked over at her. His voice was indifferent. "Up to you." At this moment, the Almighty reminded her of when she had first met him. He wasn't moved by force or persuasion and was hard to get close to. No matter what, he had to think of a way to stay here first. Bojio headed back to the dormitory. First, he spread out the quilt, then according to the steps in his memory he began to press and shape it. It looked like a simple step. She also followed the instructions in the tutorial. In the end it was still soft and floppy, not qualified at all. It was still a long way from becoming a piece of tofu. Bojio finally understood why some students felt that they shouldn't do anything during military training. It was a spirit. The quilt's requirements were indeed too high. Time passed little by little. The quilt on the bed was folded and unfolded. The whole dormitory was very quiet, only the sound of the second hand turning could be heard. The sun had completely set in the west. Only the halos left behind could form a slender figure. The figure was lying on the ground with a spear resting on its shoulder. The muzzle of the spear was aimed at a certain point. When the shot was fired, it went straight for the bull's eye. 5 consecutive shots, each one within the 10-ring range. His shooting posture was perfect and smooth. It was as though he had become one with the surroundings. Even his breathing followed the direction of the spear. His face was handsome and elegant. Even though he was in the bushes, it didn't affect his unique aura. It was Chinemo. The elite recruits from the various troops finally saw the legendary hidden shooting. With a single point of the spear, no one was around. For them, shooting accurately was not difficult at all. The most stunning part was the silent shooting and the unstoppable movements. Prince watched from the side. He retracted his gaze and looked at the Lamborghini not far away. It seemed like he didn't just have a background. A regiment commander had come to pick him up. It was enough to show his capabilities. That was what Prince was thinking before Chinemo put on his military jacket. When he saw the man in front of him put on his military jacket and walk towards them, Prince was stunned by the tassel on his shoulder. That was a major general? So young? He was a major general. That wasn't possible. Prince found it unbelievable. In the military, one's ability depended on one's age. This person was too young. Unless he had completed a secret mission outside the borders and achieved great merits. Otherwise, it wasn't possible for him to be a major general. The 50 recruits were stunned by Chinmo's performance. "You weren't fast enough and the range of your movements was too large. You'll have to practice 50 more rounds today." After Chinemo finished his sentence, Moichin looked at Chinemo. Half of the recruits were out of energy. But here, obeying orders was the only requirement. It was impossible not to know that there was one less person in the team. especially the comrades who had been working together for the past 2 days. Prince had asked his captain twice where Bojio had gone. During the break he couldn't help but ask again. This time it wasn't his captain who answered him. Instead, it was the faint and deep voice that rose behind him. "It sounds like you care a lot about number 10. Prince paused. He hadn't expected his boss to speak to him, the one who controlled the entire troop. After witnessing the other party's shooting, Prince had already treated him as his own fighting spirit. He didn't notice the deep look in Chinmo's eyes when he spoke. Prince saluted. "Reporting, number 10 has been away from the team for a long time. I would like to know what happened." Failed internal affairs. Chinmo buttoned the last button on his military jacket. The aura of abstinence assaulted his senses. Prince didn't know how to finish his sentence. But it was also because Bojio's actions were too eye-catching. Especially in this military exercise, he was too outstanding. She was so outstanding that it was hard not to notice her. When the senior official heard that there was such a recruit, he was called over by the ice-cold youngster who was the most difficult to manipulate. After the meeting he didn't even drink his tea. Instead he asked someone to call Chinmo. In the military, Chinmo's etiquette was on point. The moment he saw someone, his first action was to salute. It was straightforward and clean. But even so, his aura couldn't lie. Some senior officials had also said that Chinmo was probably the soldier who didn't look like a soldier the most. "What's wrong with number 10? I heard that you talked to him alone?" The senior official continued, "No matter what the problem is, let me say this first. There are so many good seedlings this time. You didn't say a word and kicked half of them away. Now there are only a few of them left. Don't kick them away casually, especially number 10. Think of a way to keep him." Chinmo didn't give a clear answer. "We'll talk about it after he passes the internal affairs test." "Isn't it just because he doesn't know how to fold his blanket? I heard the report before I came. It's nothing. You aren't required to fold your blankets during a mission." The senior official tried to persuade him. Even though the ice-cold youngster was his soldier, he had never listened to him in this aspect. Most importantly, the soldiers here. In the past they were all troublemakers. Some of them came from powerful families and were thrown into a certain military unit. They were capable but weren't easy to discipline. Some of them were special talents with arrogance and weren't easy to tame. After these people met the ice-cold youngster, they were all very obedient. During the days when Chinmo wasn't in the military, he was the one who was the most troubled. These people knew how to create trouble. Many people weren't willing to take over this mission because of this reason. It was indeed good to gain merits, but once Chinmo left, these rascals would be in a mess. Who could stand it? This rascal was indeed very vicious when it came to judging people. The people he picked rarely got into trouble. He just loved to let people go. Thinking up to this point, the senior official reminded Chinmo, "I don't care about the others, but number 10 must stay with me. I'll see." After Chinmo said these two words, he stood up, straightened his military cap and saluted. The senior official was angry but he couldn't do anything about it. He had said so much, but this rascal didn't even give him a definite answer. It seemed like it was useless for him to keep number 10. After dusk, the weather started to get gloomy. The training wasn't over yet. The aroma of the food in the canteen could be smelled from afar. After Chinmo came out from the bureau chief's office, he paused for a moment and tilted his head to look at the exhausted recruits. 50 rounds of crawling forward shooting was never a joke. After practicing like this, some people just wanted to drink a big cup of hot water. Their stomachs would definitely be hungry. After all, it was time to eat. After taking a look, Chinmo returned to his place. He started to analyze all the new members. But after he opened the information, there was no reply for a long time. The psychologist who came to deliver food to Chinmo also realized this problem. He was more or less shocked. After all, no matter what happened, boss never got stuck when analyzing people. After looking for a while, the psychologist was about to speak. Just then, Chinmo's voice rang out casually. "I don't have any psychological problems. I can carry out missions anytime if that's what you're here to ask." The psychologist choked. Every time he faced his boss, everything he learned seemed to be returned to the books. He thought for a moment and decided to change the topic to lower his boss's guard. "I heard there's a new recruit in our team. He wiped out an entire team alone and he's a technical soldier. Such a person is suitable for the operation team. Boss, didn't you always say that Fatty's stamina couldn't keep up? Now that we have this recruit, since he can cross the jungle and is familiar with field operations, his stamina shouldn't be a problem. Mimish, this is a good thing." After the psychologist finished speaking, he wanted to change the topic. Unexpectedly, Chinemo had already stood up. He looked down at him with his tall and slender figure. Don't waste your time thinking of a topic. The person you're talking about is in the elimination list. Psychologist. He understood that today wasn't a suitable day to talk to his boss. There were usually 3 types of situations with his boss. The first type was when he was indifferent no matter what he said. The second type was when he closed his eyes and listened to him. The third type was like the one he was facing now. It was a professional book review that dealt a huge blow to his confidence. However, if it was the third type, it meant that his boss's emotions were fluctuating. Did something happen in the past 2 days? The psychologist frowned. He couldn't figure it out. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't figure it out. No one else could tell who recruit number 10 was. However, now that his boss had left, he could only eat the food that the psychologist had brought. Bing, who was following behind Qin Mo, thought that young Master Qin didn't want to see the doctor and wanted to eat at the cafeteria. What he didn't expect was, the moment he came out, young Master Qin asked, "Where is she?" The soldier thought for a while before realizing that young Master Qin was talking about that brave recruit. Reporting, number 10 has been in the dorm the entire time and hasn't come out. Qin Mo's slender fingers paused for a moment before he walked in a certain direction. The soldier looked up. It was clearly in the direction of the recruit dormitories. He wanted to go with them. But it was obvious that young Master Qin didn't want him to follow. The soldier was well behaved and stood guard downstairs. He knew that the more talented young Master Qin met, the stricter he would be. But this time it didn't seem to be the case. The soldier was puzzled, his brows knitted together, but he couldn't think of a reason. In the dormitory, Bojio was still struggling with the quilt on the bed. In the end, a glint flashed across her eyes. She smiled, looking especially handsome and mischievous. After almost a minute, she looked over. The quilt, which was hard to form, was placed at the corner of the bed. From the side, it looked even more formal than the wolf's fangs. The shape of a tofu block was the standard in the military. Bojio stuffed one hand into her pocket and took out her phone with the other. She was prepared to send a photo to the Almighty for verification. Kacha. The photo was just formed. The door was pushed open. Bojio didn't turn back. She thought it was her roommate. She lowered her head, preparing to send a message. The phone in her hands was snatched away. Bojio didn't need to look up. She knew who it was just by looking at the slender hands. She felt guilty for a moment. She glanced at the quilt on the bed and turned, a confused smile on her face. Reporting, "I know how to fold the quilt." "Is that so?" Qin Mo arched a brow. He walked towards the bed, his gaze landing on the angular, square-shaped quilt. Then he bent his waist slightly. There wasn't a single crease on his uniform. From this position, his face was extremely handsome. Bojio wanted to look a little longer. Qin Mo pulled with one hand. The quilt was instantly torn apart. The small branches inside were scattered on the bed. But Qin Mo was cunning. He acted as though he didn't see the branches. He said faintly, "Fold one for me to see." Chapter 1143. Bojio was starting to feel a little frustrated. But Qin Mo just stood there, his long legs crossed and his back leaning against the bed frame. His eyes looked like high-quality amber under the light. He was obviously waiting for her to make a move. Bojio accepted her fate. She rolled up her sleeves and walked over. "Sir, I would like to know where I exposed myself." Her disguise skills weren't bad. The quilt wouldn't be seen through immediately. Qin Mo swept her a glance, a faint smile on his face. "You aren't the only soldier I have." This meant that the people the Almighty had brought had many tricks up their sleeves. "Your work is indeed exquisite. At least you didn't use something like a mineral water bottle that can be seen at a glance." When Qin Mo said this, he tilted his head and lit a cigarette, looking at her just like that. Bojio didn't feel that it was a compliment. Anyway, she had been exposed. She had never felt so awkward before. Since she was folding it on the spot, Bojio decided to return to her original self. Her movements were swift. One fold, another fold, and another fold. She didn't care if the quilt was formed. Her posture was handsome, the sound of the wind when she lifted the quilt. In the end, the quilt was pushed into a ball. But it was only pushed into a ball. Qin Mo tapped his fingers on it, saying slowly, "Is this what you mean by you know how to fold the quilt? Ordinary people do it this way." Bojio wasn't unable to take care of herself. She just hadn't been exposed to military life and knew how to fold tofu. No one was perfect. Qin Mo retracted his hand, his expression unchanged. "This is the military. 5 words. Bojio paused. Then she removed the quilt. This time when she lowered her head, she was much more serious than before. Even her brows were furrowed. She used her fingers to look at her handsome face. It was a stark contrast to how obedient she was. This scene was strangely familiar to Chin Mo. However, compared to these, his gaze was more focused on that person's furry head. When he hadn't seen her, he had assumed she had left. She couldn't even analyze the recruits. Hence, her presence would only distract him. Bojio was folding the quilt seriously. She didn't notice Chin Mo's expression. Just as she was about to fold the quilt in one piece, suddenly his left hand was pressed down. Then, the familiar minty tobacco fragrance drifted over from behind. It was so light and cold that it could easily make one's heart tighten. Who taught you to do this? Chin Mo tilted his head, speaking into her ears. Line up the lines. That posture. From the side, it looked as though he was hugging her. The two of them were very close to each other. He was so close that Bojio smiled when she saw his handsome face. When he was young, he had taught him how to fold things. But at that time he was folding dumplings. Bojio had always felt that making dumplings was just stacking dumplings. Her whole face was a mess, but she still couldn't learn it. It seemed that she was really not very good at handicrafts. Bojio tilted her head, glancing at his side profile. Because of the light, the bridge of his nose and chin were so white that they seemed to glow. How did she learn to fold her blanket when he was so handsome? She only cared about looking at him. It was the same when she made dumplings when she was young. Chapter 1144. All of a sudden she made a move. Unknowingly, her lips touched the Almighty's face. Bojio stilled at the smooth and cool touch. Chin Mo probably hadn't expected this to happen either. His bent back froze in place. In that instant, the air seemed to have frozen. Her heart started to beat faster. Bojio hadn't even gotten the taste yet. Chin Mo had already turned his face over, his eyes as beautiful as the night sky, shining with the reflection of the night. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Bojio felt the need to explain. I accidentally touched it. Chin Mo's right hand was still pressed against the blanket, his expression nonchalant. Accidentally? Why did you touch it for so long? He exposed her without hesitation. Wasn't she just taking advantage of him for a little longer? Bojio smiled. Since I touched it, I took the opportunity to touch it a little longer. Is that so? Chin Mo straightened, his gaze probing. The moment she heard the word, she knew the Almighty didn't believe her. She felt wrong, they had indeed touched it. If she really wanted to kiss him, she wouldn't have just touched him. It was two. Before Bojio could finish her sentence, Chin Mo, dressed in his military uniform, lowered his head and kissed her lips forcefully. Bojio stilled, her fingers still tugging on the blanket, forgetting to move. Bojio stilled, her fingers still tugging on the blanket, forgetting to move. The familiar minty tobacco scent, clear and fragrant, seeping into the tip of her tongue. Her heart wasn't at peace for a moment. As the kiss deepened, an inescapable numbness spread. It was densely packed and gentle, but it was also very powerful. Bojio tightened her grip on the blanket. The numbness seemed to be connected to her heart, the lack of oxygen causing her brain to go blank. Outside the window, the moon had just risen. Chin Mo pressed the blanket between them with one hand, the other holding onto the back of her head. The softness and sweetness made it hard for him to let go. This was what he wanted to do the most after seeing her. But Chin Mo didn't forget that they were in the military. The military meant that there were people everywhere. But this person kept moving around in front of him. At the end of the kiss, Chin Mo couldn't help biting down harder. Instantly, Bojio's pupils tensed. Her eyes lit up, her breathing unstable. The Almighty was just like those little secretaries in novels. When he wasn't willing to kiss, he would bite. However, the smart Bojio wouldn't say this out loud. After all, her pet had always been arrogant since young. If he knew that she had made him her little secretary, it wouldn't be good. Bojio licked her lips, a smile on her face. Sweet, now I have the motivation to fold the blanket. Continue to stack. Chin Mo pushed the person away with one hand. On the surface he looked cold and abstinent. Upon closer inspection, when his eyes landed on the youngster's petal-like thin lips, they deepened. You still have 10 minutes. Bojio arched a brow. 10 minutes? That was such a short time. Did she kiss him for nothing? If you can't learn it in 10 minutes, I'll throw you out of the army. Chin Mo pinched the person's face, a cold smile on his face. Don't think that just a kiss is enough. Anyone who doesn't pass the test will be kicked out. Bojio puffed up her left cheek, looking like an energetic youngster. 10 minutes isn't enough. Chapter 11:45. She had no choice but to follow the Almighty's instructions. Even the mischievous Bojio had no choice but to follow the Almighty's instructions seriously. The advantage of this kind of one-on-one tutorial was that the students could clearly see the strength and alignment of the folded quilt like a tofu cube. The disadvantage was, are you stupid? Bojio couldn't be bothered to count how many times she had been scolded. It was exactly the same as when the Almighty had tutored her in physics. Speaking of which, ever since she was young, the Almighty had always scolded her. She didn't know how to change the words. Just as Bojio was about to fold the quilt for the 10th time, Chinemo pulled her wrist. He grabbed her wrist. That's enough. Bojio broke into a smile, slightly surprised. That's it? I meant that the time is done. Chinemo raised his other hand, tilting his wrist to show her the time on his phone. Bojio glanced at it before reaching for the phone. She adjusted the time by 5 minutes. It's not time yet. Are you trying to rebel? Chinemo raised his hand and pulled her out. Little Bojio, when did you become such a rascal? Bojio replied righteously, I've always been a rascal, but it's more obvious now. Once they were out, they would probably be thrown away. Staying in the dormitory was the safest. Chinemo glanced at the person who was holding onto the bed frame with a smile on her face. He let go of her wrist, arching a brow. I'll give you 1 second to let go. His aura was indeed strong. Fortunately, Bojio had a strong sense of resistance. She didn't let go, instead she used the force to pull Chinemo back. With a nimble turn, she pressed him onto the freshly folded quilt. Chinemo's gaze deepened. Even though he was below her, his aura was on full display. Bojio felt a little guilty. But even though she felt guilty, she still had to show her dominance at this moment. Little Blackie told me about what happened that day. I thought you wanted to leave, which was why I changed the password. Besides, Brother Mo had a small communication device with you. I thought you were trying to collect evidence of my crimes and wanted to arrest me. I was upset for a long time. Since Brother Mo is willing to help me, I don't have to worry about small details like folding the blankets. Chinmo's brows furrowed slightly as she looked at Mo Jingshin. Brother Mo, don't worry. So, you still remember the kidnapping incident? Chinemo was cold and noble. His voice was slow. Sugar Daddy. Bojio felt that if the Almighty called her by her code name, it would only add to her dark history. What do you think I care about? Chinemo looked at her, his military uniform spotless. You messed up someone's life and left just like that. Have you never thought about what would happen if someone couldn't find you? Chinmo's voice was indifferent, as though he was stating a fact. But it was so easy for him to stir up all the guilt in her heart. I won't leave this time, I definitely won't leave. Bojio's eyes were bright and dark. Chinemo replied faintly, you aren't qualified. You can't stay just because you say so. Also, don't try to seduce me. Bojio muttered, you're the one who seduced me. Chinemo replied. He wanted to pinch that soft face again. But at this moment, the wooden door was pushed open from the outside. Chapter 11:46. Silence. It wasn't a normal silence. Both of them were petrified rapidly. It wasn't Chinemo and Bojio who were petrified. Prince and Bojio were petrified as they witnessed the scene. They looked as though it was the end of the world. Anyone would be exhausted after a day of training. But now, their bodies were invigorated. Prince looked at the tall and domineering figure under the lights. He was dressed in his military uniform, looking elegant and elegant. He was being pinned down by his good roommate. That position and the black-haired fellow's face. Prince turned around, exchanging glances with Wolf. Prince's thoughts were the most complicated. *CK, what exactly was going on? The black-haired fellow's actions were probably too offensive. Even their major general couldn't stand it and wanted to punish him. But this scene. Why was the black-haired fellow forcing himself on the head coach? It was a mess. Prince felt that even with all his experience, it wasn't enough to explain the current situation. Black-haired fellow, do you really not have any backing? How dare you treat the major general like this without any backing? Do you know his nickname in the military? The Smiling Devil. Black-haired fellow, you're finished? Compared to the Crown Prince's many thoughts, Wolf's eyes were filled with shock and surprise. With his boss's skills, if he wasn't willing, no one would be able to hold him down. But the scene in front of him. Wolf, who had the calmest personality, couldn't help but overthink. Bojio didn't expect anyone to enter, so she didn't move. Chinemo raised his eyelids. Aren't you going to get up? This sentence basically confirmed Bojio's crime. Prince's mouth was agape. He looked at Bojio with a gaze full of words. Bojio returned his gaze. It wasn't what you think. You dragged the general onto the bed. Isn't it what I think? Prince glared at her. Bojio raised her eyebrows. Healthy thoughts. Prince replied with his gaze. My thoughts are healthy. The main problem is, have you thought about the consequences of pressing on the Major General? Bojio wanted to return his gaze. Chinamo had already straightened. He reached out to tidy his sleeves that were wrinkled by the youngster. His voice was calm. How long are you going to keep flirting? Bojio, Prince. Flirting? Them? Definitely not. Come out. When Chinamo walked to the door, he threw another word over. He stuffed one hand into his military pants and turned his face, looking extremely indifferent. It was obvious who this word was directed at. Bojio knew that it wouldn't be the same if she didn't follow him out. Prince felt that this person was most likely dead and was hesitating if he should bid farewell to his comrade. Chinmo's gaze landed on him. That one glance sent chills down his spine, and he silently shrank back. Under the moonlight, the fog rose. The light in the army was not weak. Even at this time, many people were still outside. Chinamo walked forward. Bojio followed behind. After the soldiers stationed in the command center saw this scene, they couldn't help but look over. He thought to himself that this recruit was really tenacious. He was already in this state and still dared to continue following young Master Qin. However, this was not what puzzled the recruits. Chapter 1147. On this day, everyone in the operation team felt that something wasn't right with Wolf. The main thing was that he shouldn't be here at this hour. Yet, he sat in front of them with a stern expression. They couldn't even swallow their food. As for why? No one would be able to eat with a sniper staring at them, right? Wolf, what exactly is going on? Can't you just say it? Hunter was the first to break down because Wolf had looked at him more than 10 times. He was really going against the trend recently. Wolf Fong finally opened his mouth. However, he threw out a bomb that was even more shocking than his gaze. Just now, someone had pressed the boss under their body. Before he could finish his sentence, Magician dropped his chopsticks. Magician dropped the chopsticks in his hand in disbelief. Hunter stood up and asked, "Who is that?" The flames of gossip ignited the entire operation team. Wolf was still solemn. Recruit number 10. Hunter had an incredulous expression on his face. Magician wanted to know what happened next. Then what did he do to boss? Wolf frowned. What could he do? Magician was stumped by this question. But very quickly Wolf threw out another bomb. Indeed, he seemed to want to do something to boss. With this, everyone in the operation team exchanged glances. News, this was something that had never happened in the military for a long time. He dared to lay his hands on boss. This recruit was probably crippled. But as they were familiar with Chinamo, they quickly realized that something wasn't right. Boss allowed that recruit to press him? MMH. How is that possible? There must be something wrong here. Boss knows this person? Hunter. What? Go and ask around. Why should I be the one asking around? Why aren't you guys going? That's your recruit. If you don't go, who else would? Hunter cursed. *CK. His frustration could be seen. Ever since he had taken in a recruit, he had been slapped in the face. Now he was asked to find out the relationship between the recruit and boss? According to boss's personality, anyone who tried to find out would be in trouble. If there was no relationship, he would definitely be the one who would be destroyed. If there was a relationship, it shouldn't be. How would boss be related to a recruit? But how was he going to explain the fact that boss had been suppressed? No one could figure it out. In less than 20 minutes, Yi Zichen and Yi Zichen finally arrived. The big devil, Major General Qin, was pressed under a new recruit. The news spread from the dormitory to the action team, and from the action team back to the dormitory. In the end, it reached the ears of the old chief who was drinking tea. What did you say? The old general felt that he needed some time to digest this. The aide-de-camp had tried his best to gather information, but he could only dispel some of it at this time. It could also be a rumor. Who dares to spread rumors about that icy brat? The old general kept thinking about the recruits with good potential. The rumors are still like this. I'm afraid this is another one of his ways of kicking people out. The adjutant said hesitantly, I don't think so. Kicking someone away by letting someone press him down? You think it's impossible? That kid would do anything just to kick people. Or do you think he's really a living Buddha who can deliver all living beings from suffering just because he's good-looking? The old chief put down the teacup. This time the adjutant stood on the chief's side. After all, young Master Qin had never been a good person. He still remembered the first time he had met young Master Qin. He had been such a pure and noble person, as though he had a Buddhist incense around him. It had been easy to let down one's guard. At that time he had still been young, but many people in the military had been scratching their heads. Indeed, perhaps young Master Qin had intentionally made the recruit offend him in order to kick him out? But was it necessary? The old general felt the need to have a chat with that icy brat. He didn't care about anything else, but the new technical soldier had to stay. At this moment, Bo Jio still wasn't aware that her feat was known by the entire military unit. She was still thinking about how to get past the stage of folding the blanket. Qin Mo, who had already pushed open the door and entered the room, spoke again. Didn't anyone tell you that this place only accepts male soldiers and not female soldiers? Bo Jio was still feeling guilty. Missions don't discriminate between men and women. Besides, the action team doesn't have a technical soldier right now. I'm just here to fill in the gap. Qin Mo turned, his voice calm. You have a lot of excuses. Come over. He allowed her to go over again. What was he doing this time? Bo Jio was still on her guard. But the moment she got close to the Almighty, her face was being pinched. Do you know your mistake? Bo Jio nodded. With the Almighty's gaze, if she didn't admit her mistake, he might really throw her out of the window. What did I do wrong? Bo Jio was very smart. Whatever you say is wrong. Qin Mo chuckled. His white-gloved fingers pinched Bo Jio again. His tone was cold. I seem to have said it before. If I see you living with a bunch of men again, I'll crush your claws. Have you forgotten? Bo Jio smiled. The military unit stays together. I can't possibly camp in the wilderness. Bo Jio's words were logical. She knew that the arrogant Almighty would only go so far. He wouldn't really break her claws. Her threat was automatically filtered into sweetness. When she was with the Almighty, she had to think more. Qin Mo's gaze swept past the hand that was stirring up trouble on his body. He moved it away coldly. Tonight you will sleep here. Bo Jio smiled. All right. If she could sleep the first night, she could sleep the second. She would follow this plan. Qin Mo watched as a certain someone looked as though she had taken advantage of him. He arched a brow. And go back. I'm afraid you're cold, she replied seriously. Qin Mo smirked. The temperature inside is 27 degrees Celsius. You should find a better excuse. All right. Bo Jio felt a tinge of regret when she said that. But it didn't matter. Since she was going to hug the Almighty to sleep today, it wouldn't be a problem for her to take advantage of him. She had thought that they could be alone for a while. After a few minutes, someone knocked on the door. Come in. The Almighty seemed to ignore her when he said that. Bo Jio stood at the side in her camouflage uniform. Her trousers were rolled up, showing signs of training. Compared to the Almighty's aura, she looked like an ancient servant who would serve tea and grind ink for the crown prince. She hadn't even come to warm the bed. What a pity. Bo Jio pouted her lips. The soldier brought 2 bowls of rice in. One was filled with potatoes and beef while the other was filled with scrambled eggs with tomatoes. There were also 4 big buns. It was obvious that both of them had the same appetite. The soldier was shocked when he took the food. Young Master Qin had obviously ordered the newbie's food as well. Should he inform the doctor? After all, young Master Qin's actions today weren't logical. Bo Jio's gaze didn't leave the 2 bowls after she saw them. Qin Mo placed the pen in his hand down and glanced at her. Go wash your hands. The soldier trembled when he heard that. This person wasn't related to young Master Qin, was he? He didn't dare to eavesdrop. He placed the food down and closed the door. Bo Jio felt that her hands were clean enough. But she still couldn't escape the Almighty's discipline. Hand sanitizer. She reached her hands back and applied the sanitizer before washing the other side. Finally, she could eat. The buns in the military were made of real materials. They were big and white and filled with the fragrance of wheat. Bo Jio was especially obedient when she ate. She didn't molest Qin Mo. Instead, she sat there and took a bite of the bun, her cheeks puffed up. Qin Mo sat down as well. When he saw that the person in front of him only knew how to eat the bun and didn't even take any food, his bamboo chopsticks touched her subconsciously. Bo Jio opened her mouth, chewing on the fragrant potato. She wasn't polite at all. Qin Mo raised a brow but didn't continue with his harsh words. As Bo Jio ate, she suddenly remembered something. It was very important. Brother Mo, next time someone sends you food, don't shower. It was fine if she saw it. But if someone saw it? No way. Chinamo placed the bamboo chopsticks in his hand down. He glanced at the youngster who was still biting on the bun. He didn't reply to her. Instead he asked slowly, "Are you the soldier who brought me food in the afternoon? The one who took his time and kept glancing at me, refusing to leave?" Bojio paused. The trap left by his words was completely burying her. "Mitch, it's me." Bojio glanced up, her words reasonable. "I was tempted by Brother Mo's figure. That's why, Brother Mo, when someone sends you food, don't shower." Chinamo watched her righteous words and her puffed-up cheeks. His hands itched again. He reached out and pinched her cheeks, his thin lips asking, "You don't want others to see me?" Bojio never hid her possessiveness. Chinmo's voice was calm. "It's hard to avoid in the military." Bojio thought about it and lowered her head to take another bite of the bun. Her cheeks were still being pinched. "Don't worry, there aren't many hooligans like you in the military." Chinamo released his hand. Bojio's face was finally free, but it wasn't a compliment. "Clean up after you're done." Chinamo stood up. There was still a distance between them, making it hard for her to read his intentions. Bojio bit the bun, her voice a little muffled. "What about you? Where are you going?" He couldn't possibly call her over and leave her alone, right? That would be a waste. "Shower." With that, Chinamo walked into the bathroom. If it hadn't been for a certain someone, Chinamo would have been done with his shower. Showering after every training session was something Captain Chin had to do. When Bojio heard the word shower, her mind started to wander. On second thought, it wasn't bad coming to the military since she could spy on beauties. After finishing the last bite of the bun, Bojio coolly ignored the 2 rice bowls on the table. Since she had finished eating, it wouldn't be too late to shower after she was done admiring the Almighty's bathing scene. He was a major general after all. There was a fridge in Chinmo's room. Usually there would only be water in it. At most there would be 3 cans of beer. In the military this was strictly controlled. Bojio opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water. She wanted to use this as an excuse to look at him openly. Who knew that the Almighty would shower so quickly? He used cold water and there wasn't any heat at all. When he came out, his black hair was wet, making his extremely dark eyes seem deeper. "Why are you standing here?" Chinamo asked, stepping out of the bathroom. Bojio hadn't even executed her plan when she was blinded by the scene in front of her. All she could see was a pair of military pants, water droplets on his upper body. From his neck to his collarbone, from his collarbone to his abs, and finally the long pants below his abs. Bojio watched until she didn't dare to continue. The Almighty without his military uniform was more than 10 times more dangerous than when he was in uniform. "Does it feel good?" Chinamo reached out, pressing the person who was staring at him with a pair of clear eyes on the spot. Behind Bojio was the fridge. It wasn't a big deal, but the smell of a shower rushed into her face. It was clean and refreshing. "It's all right." Bojio hugged Chinmo's waist, her face serious. "If only I could hug you again." Chinamo frowned and pulled the 2 hands away. Then he bent the Gundam's body and looked at her. "If you dare to touch me again without my permission, I'll throw you out if you try." Bojio didn't move. After all, it wasn't worth it to be eliminated just to take advantage of him. Chinamo glanced to the side and tossed the youngster's unwashed bowl into the sink. His slender and fair hands brushed across the edge of the stainless steel, giving off a feeling of wasting God's gifts. "I'll do it." Bojio walked over, pressing the bowl down and pouring a lot of dishwashing detergent in. Chinamo arched a brow, wiping his hands. He thought he could ignore her. Who knew that a certain someone's method of washing dishes was to stretch out a finger and spin it around in the water while pressing on the rice bowl? "Are you stupid?" Chinamo couldn't stand it anymore. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing her hand down, his thin lips cold. Bojio felt her back heating up. When she snapped back to her senses, she remembered that the Almighty was still naked. His heartbeat sped up a little. He was holding her hands. It always seemed as though he would be able to snatch the throne of the Almighty even if he entered the blood pool alone. When he wore his military uniform with a sweep of his rifle, no one dared to come within 800 meters. Now that the water flowed past, his hands were holding hers, rubbing against the edge of the bowl. It was numb, reminding her of the strength he had used to knead her with his hands. Bojio's ears burned. That was why the Almighty shouldn't shower. If he did, wouldn't it be the same as letting her sleep with him? It was a trap, it was too deep. "What inappropriate scenes are you thinking about again?" He tilted his head, the water droplets falling from his black hair landing on her shoulder. His brows were handsome and it was convenient for them to be in such a position. He lowered his voice beside her ear, looking elegant and seductive. Bojo replied calmly, "No, I'm washing the dishes seriously." Chapter 1148. I'm thinking about how to sleep with you. The words rolled in Bojo's throat, but in the end she didn't say it. If she said it, the Almighty would probably throw her out. They hadn't shared a bed yet. She couldn't be anxious. She had to keep a low profile. Bojo suppressed her thoughts, but she couldn't. She reached out and pulled the towel over. With a flip of her hand, she changed their positions. Her face was still hot. She said directly, "I'm thinking about how to sleep with you. Are you going to let me sleep with you?" In this position, Bojo pressed one hand on Chin Mo's chest while the other hand hung down. Water was still dripping from her fingertips. Chin Mo didn't move, allowing her to press him. Perhaps it was because he had just showered, but his extremely black hair was unruly. His eyes were deep and his thin lips were moist and glossy. The color was light, soft and abstinent. It really made one's heart itch. She wanted to take action. Bojo could hear her own heartbeat. One after another. The tip of her nose was filled with his scent. There was a faint smell of smoke. Mixed with his scent, it was a mint-like cold Buddhist scent. It was tempting. Bojo was about to pinch his chin and kiss him. She didn't care if he would be thrown out. She wanted to stamp it anyway. Chin Mo didn't reject her. Even though his gaze was faint, when he touched the youngster in his arms, there was something else. Bojo was about to kiss him as she wished. Suddenly, a voice rang beside her ear. "Reporting." F***CK, who was shouting for a report at this time? She was disturbing her family. Bojo's eyes were filled with annoyance. It made her face look even more handsome. In reality, no matter how obedient she was in front of Chin Mo, Bojo was still Bojo, the Z that walked out from the darkness. If she wasn't careful, she would reveal her true nature. Her extremely dark eyes were like a sharp sword, cold and sharp. When she glanced over, she saw someone enter. The person who entered, "I must have entered the wrong room. Yes, I must have entered the wrong room." Hunter muttered to himself. He wanted to close the door and enter again. But F***CK, he entered the wrong room. In this place, other than the machine guns, Boss was the only one living here. As a member of the People's Liberation Army, he had to be calm and learn to face the impossible. Even if a recruit pressed down on their boss and said, "I'm thinking about how to sleep with you. Will you let me sleep with you?" He could not be a deserter. Reporting boss. As Hunter raised his voice, he turned to look at his leader once more. He wanted to see his leader's reaction. Since he was going to die no matter what, he might as well watch a little more and let his team members gossip when he got back. It was a pity he didn't see anything. Not only was there not a trace of panic on the young master's face, he even stretched out his hand and pushed the young man away. His eyes grew even colder. "Speak." When Boss wasn't wearing his shirt, his aura was too strong. It was so hard. How did the recruit bite through it? Wait a minute. He came in to say something. The hunter looked back at the door. Those bastards who encouraged him to come in didn't even go upstairs. They were all hiding downstairs. **CK. Boss, what do you plan to do with soldier number 10? The louder the hunter's voice, the more his heart trembled. Don't be fooled by his boss's current state. He would definitely settle the score with him in the future. Why did he have to come in now and see this kind of scene? Chapter 1149. Just kicking him away? Boss, someone was plotting against you just now. But he just kicked him away and didn't cut him up. Hunter thought about himself. If he had spoken to his boss like that, he wouldn't have survived. Hence, there was still a situation. Hunter stood there motionlessly. Chin Mo walked over. The action of taking out a bottle of mineral water was enough to release his aura. What? Do you have a better idea? Hunter touched his feet. Reporting no. Why did you come in if you didn't? Chin Mo lowered his voice. His tone was a little cold and there was a hint of solemnity in it. Hunter didn't know how he had offended his boss. He shut his eyes. It's the old general. He wants you to keep him no matter what. He said he's the best technical soldier and many troops are fighting for him. Bojo smiled. The old general has good taste. I'm not only skilled, I'm also handsome. Hunter. At this moment you shouldn't speak. How can you praise yourself like that? Captain will make you reflect on yourself, you know? As expected, Chin Mo glanced over and pointed at her. His voice was calm. You go to the corner. Bojo didn't retort. She stuffed a hand into her pocket and walked to the wall. Chinamo spoke again, his voice lazy and magnetic. Face the wall. Bojo turned and looked at the white wall. Her head was almost touching it. It was boring not being able to see the Almighty's gaze. She could only kick the wall with her toes. It felt as though she was being punished. In school it was frog jumping. Now that she was in the military she was being punished by the Almighty. These days the water was hot and the water was hot. Chinamo watched as a certain someone wasn't being obedient. He tilted his head up and drank a mouthful of water. Hunter wanted to use this chance to slip away. He had a huge pile of gossip that he couldn't wait to tell his team members. He had to tell them. He couldn't be the only one who knew such a secret that could silence a witness. But the moment he lifted his leg, "Where are you going?" It was his boss's voice. It was slow, so slow it was cold. Hunter touched his heels again. "Reporting, the old general is waiting for my reply." "Report, I'm going to run 10 kilometers with weights." Chinamo put on his shirt casually. Hunter's face fell. He was on the verge of tears. "Boss?" Chinamo arched a brow. 15 kilometers. The hunter immediately stopped bargaining. He raised his head and closed his eyes. Yes. What had he done to deserve this? After Hunter closed the door, only the two of them were left in the room. Now Bojo wasn't lethal anymore. She was dressed in her military uniform, facing the wall. One of her trousers was rolled up to her knee, revealing her fair and slender calf, glowing like jade. Just because he didn't have any lethality didn't mean that he would be safe. He kicked his leg again. "Brother Mo, please continue to teach me how to fold the quilt. Standing like this is a waste of time. There are only 11 hours left until the housekeeping inspection tomorrow." With that, Bojo wanted to turn back. Chinamo walked over. "Turn around and stand for 10 more minutes." "Brother Mo, you can't punish me like a child," Bojo suggested seriously. "You can punish me by kissing you." Chinamo reached out and lifted the man's chin. He smiled coldly. "Poor thing, you're dreaming again." Chapter 1150. You have to follow the rules in the military, do you understand? Chinamo moved his hand away, his gaze landing on her neck unconsciously. The room was well lit. When she lowered her head, the back of her neck was exposed. It was so soft that it was a little eye-catching. His porcelain white skin glowed, probably because of his aura. In that instant it became extremely beautiful. Chinamo turned, averting his gaze. He walked out of the room. Bojo arched a brow. She still didn't understand what was going on. But the person on the other side was gone. After leaving the room, Chinamo was blown by the cold wind, regaining his senses. The person in the room probably didn't understand. He couldn't control himself when he faced her. He didn't know what he would do. He even had the urge to destroy her completely. Yet she kept sending herself into his mouth. Bojo was still standing at the corner. When she saw that the Almighty didn't seem to have any intention of returning, she turned and leaned back on the single bed in the room. The scent of mint and tobacco was very obvious. Even the pillow was filled with his scent. Bojo buried her face in it. The Almighty was really hard to woo. She had finally managed to woo him the last time. This time she had to try again. The worst part was that the Almighty was extremely guarded. He didn't even give her a chance to flirt. It was a little difficult. She couldn't send flowers in the military. That would be too high profile. The Almighty didn't like high-profile things. Bojo lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. There wasn't much time left. She had to woo him as soon as possible. With that in mind, Bojo tilted her head and changed her position. Her eyes landed under the office table. There was a keyboard there. Bojo was familiar with that keyboard. It was the one they had used to train their hand speed in the club. It wasn't just the Almighty and her, it was the same for every member of Supreme Alliance. Even here they had brought the keyboard along. Actually, in your heart you still like esports the most, right? Not as a descendant of the Chin family. Just as Chinamo. With that in mind, Bojo sat up and whipped out her phone. She opened the SIM card she had been using for the past few days and dialed a string of numbers. Bojo arched a brow when he didn't pick up. When the screen lit up for the third time, he placed the phone by his ear. "Little Spade F***CKU, why did you disappear? You went overseas to film a movie and you disappeared. What's wrong with you? F***CK, I thought you broke down after reading the comments online. Let me tell you, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Do you care about gender in esports? Hurry up and come back. If you don't, I'll block you." Bojo replied calmly, "Do you have a cold? My throat is a little hoarse." When dealing with the naive Linda, she knew how to change the topic. Lin Feng sneezed. He pulled up the collar of his sweater and stood there with one hand in his pocket. From the side he looked quite cool. You can tell? I think so. Who knows why it's so cold all of a sudden? Are you outside? Bo Jio arched a brow. Lin Feng replied, his gaze drifting. I'm at the airport. Yun who is coming back today and my mom insisted that I come to fetch him. She's worried that her godson will take the car back himself. Oh, Bo Jio replied, her tone long and full of teasing. Lin Feng replied, hello. Bo Jio continued to laugh. Lin Feng smirked. I'm hanging up. Don't, Bo Jio said. I really have something important to do. Lin Feng tilted his head. What is it? I want to ask you, no, I should say you guys, to protect Supreme Alliance's right to participate in the Asian Cup. Bo Jio's eyes darkened when she said this. Lin Feng straightened. Little Spade, do you know what you're saying? Brother Mo's hand has been healed, but I'm not sure if he can participate or if he will arrive on time. Bo Jio glanced up, a glint flashing past her eyes. But there has to be a chance. Lin Feng coughed again, his nasal voice heavy. Feng Yi has been fighting for this matter, but the committee's answer wasn't satisfactory. But that year we didn't live up to expectations and didn't even get the right to participate as captain. This time it won't be the same. I didn't misjudge you, Senior Lin. Bo Jio laughed, a hint of devilishness in her voice. I won't disturb your long-awaited husband anymore. Good night. Good night, who's long-awaited. Before Lin Feng could finish his sentence, the other party hung up. When he called again, it was the same as before, switched off. What was Little Spade up to? Was she not going to appear in the future? Regardless of whether she appeared or not, shouldn't she clarify what she said just now? Lin Feng was starting to get a little irritated. There was something else in his heart. As the sound reverberated in the airport, it started to change. He could clearly hear that the flight he was waiting for was about to land in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Lin Feng paused, pulling up his collar and coughing as he went to buy a bottle of water. After drinking 2 mouthfuls, he couldn't sit still and entered the washroom. He unbuttoned his pants but didn't pee. In the end, Lin Feng knocked his head against the wall, breathing clearly. *CK, why was his heart beating so fast? Lin Feng raised his hand and drank another mouthful of water. Because of an unknown restlessness, he reached out to grab his head. There were also other girls at the airport. When they saw him, they simply exclaimed how handsome he was. Some covered their mouths, surprise filling their faces. It was obvious they knew who he was. Lin Feng also noticed it. With the fans around, he couldn't do anything stupid. He could only return to his seat and pull his sweater up to cover his mouth and nose. It was very tiring to pretend to be deep in thought. He raised his hand and glanced at his watch. The closer it was to the time, the hotter his chest was. The last time was finally here. Lin Feng stood up instantly. Suddenly he remembered that he needed time to get off the plane. He could only pretend as if nothing had happened and sit back down. These 2 days, because of Spade Z's identity, Supreme Alliance was being watched very closely. Hence, Lin Feng knew that after coming out, he wouldn't be an individual anymore. He would be representing Supreme Alliance. He pretended to be solemn and calm, trying to keep a low profile. Under normal circumstances, the number of fans would increase. Lin Feng rubbed his wrist, wanting to shift to another spot. Chapter 1151. Lin Feng's hand was still tugging on his collar, pulling it upwards to make himself more comfortable since his nose was stuffed. But before he could react, the person's voice rang out. The man's voice rang out, "Are you feeling unwell?" Then, she stretched out her hand and placed it on his forehead. Her fingertips were still cold. Lin Feng could only hear that indescribable restlessness becoming more obvious. For a moment he forgot to move. His heart was pounding in his chest. Oh no, he must be having a fever. The fans who recognized Lin Feng widened their eyes even more. They didn't expect to see such a scene while they were just taking a plane. Both of them were handsome and had the same tall and straight figure. The man in the pure white sweater stretched out his hand and placed it on God Lin's head. When he looked up, the feeling he gave off was exactly the same as when he was in the arena. He was handsome and deep, intoxicating. Almighty, Almighty Yun. It's Almighty Yun. 2 of the girls couldn't help but cover their lips with their hands. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Almighty Yun was back. Yun, who glanced down, one hand on the handle of his luggage. He knew that it wasn't a suitable place to chat in the airport. It's a little hot. Can you still get up? He frowned. probably not expecting the person who had come to fetch him to be in such a state. Ah! Lin Feng exclaimed. If I can get up, why can't I? It's just a little cold, I'm not afraid of a cold. With that, he straightened his legs and jumped up from his seat, his nasal voice sounding muffled as he reached for Yunhu's luggage. Yunhu arched a brow. What? Lin Feng replied, I'll help you carry it. You've caught a cold, look ahead and walk. F***ck, are you looking down on me? You've caught a cold and it's affecting my luggage? I don't dare, loser, you can't even speak properly. Let's go to the hospital first. Lin Feng's voice started to turn weak. Hospital? Why are we going there? Yunhu replied slowly, your face paled at the mention of the hospital. Lin Feng, are you that afraid of injections? Lin Feng tugged at his collar, his hair standing on end. F***ck, who's afraid? I'm a man, why would I be afraid of injections? What a joke. Let's go then. Yunhu's expression didn't change. Lin Feng started to find excuses. Go away. My mom and your mom are waiting for you to come home for dinner. They also told me that if I don't pick you up, I'll punish you. Yunhu glanced at him but didn't say a word. Then he opened WeChat and sent a voice message. I've arrived. Lin Feng isn't feeling well. I'll bring him to the hospital first. You don't have to wait for me, eat first. Lin Feng's eyes widened. He hadn't expected this guy to do this. Very soon there was a reply from the other side. Ahuzi, I'm so sorry. This brat can also get himself sick while picking up someone. You guys go ahead, don't worry. Did you hear that? Yunhu tilted his head. Lin Feng was helpless. It wasn't the first time that his mother had disliked him. He always felt that Hu Zi was his mother's biological son. Give me the car keys. Yunhu pulled his luggage out of the automatic door. Lin Feng was still confused. What? What else can I do? Can you drive in this state? Yunhu saw that he wasn't moving. He took out a bunch of keys from Lin Feng's pocket. Lin Feng coughed. F***ck robber. Yunhu didn't say anything else. After placing his luggage down, he used his hand to touch Lin Feng's forehead. Both of them were handsome and had long legs. Standing in front of the Land Rover, coupled with their posture, many people had already started to look in their direction. Lin Feng took a step back. F***ck, are you done? I'm not that weak. Even if he wanted to touch his forehead, couldn't he do it after entering the car? No F***ck. He couldn't even touch his forehead after entering the car. He was so strong and majestic. He didn't look like a little flower that needed to be protected. What a pain. It was probably because his nose was a little blocked. After entering the car, he felt that his breathing wasn't smooth. If he stretched out his leg, he would be able to touch that person's. F***ck, when did this car become so narrow? Lin Feng pulled at his collar again, half of his face buried in it. After being touched, Yunhu turned to look at the person beside him. Even though he knew that he wasn't feeling well, he couldn't help but smile. According to his personality, it wasn't easy for him to come and fetch him. As long as he didn't continue to hide from him. Yunhu placed both hands on the steering wheel. Suddenly he said slowly, that day at the airport, F***ck, I didn't cry. Lin Feng interrupted immediately. He sat up straight, his face suspiciously red. Yunhu's lips curved. F***ck, you're laughing. How humiliating. Lin Feng lay back down. His Empress Dowager had caused him so much trouble. But, this guy finally came back. Lin Feng tilted his head. His eyelids were heavy, probably because of the cold. The car drove steadily. At this hour, there would definitely be a traffic jam on the road from the airport to the city center. Time seemed to drag on endlessly. When Yunhu tilted his head, he saw that person curled up with his long legs. He wore a black hooded jacket, which only accentuated his handsome face. The tip of his nose was still red and his eyelashes were slightly long. With this look he would be the team beauty every year. Still afraid that he would be cold, he adjusted the air conditioner to the most comfortable temperature and controlled the speed of the car well. Suddenly the phone rang. Lin Feng was taking a short break, so he wasn't in a deep sleep. When he heard the voice, he opened his eyes. He watched as Yunhu picked up the phone and said something to the person on the other end. His eyes were still filled with tenderness. People with boyfriends were indeed different. Lin Feng tilted his head at this thought. His face was reflected on the car window. His lips curved, but his heart didn't beat as fast as before. It sank a little. It was probably because his nose was blocked. Sometimes this was the benefit of being a man. He didn't have to think through everything. Even if he knew clearly. This time, Yun came back for the Supreme Alliance. As for the rest, he probably got along well with that person. Hence, they maintained a brotherly distance. They had to win the Asian Cup regardless of where their captain was. Most importantly, after this competition, no one knew where they would go in the future. Hence, if they didn't win the championship, they wouldn't be able to stand in that position with the red flag and the person they liked the most. Many people would say that they were just playing games. Chapter 1152. No matter how busy the hospital was at night, it could not be compared to the daytime. The doctor on duty was also a little puzzled. Under normal circumstances, a cold would not come to an A-grade hospital like theirs. It could be treated in an outpatient clinic. However, since he was here, he would definitely prescribe medicine and have an injection. After Lin Feng heard this, his eyes widened again. I still need an injection? Injections are the fastest. The doctor passed the form to Yun and shouted, next. He really didn't give Lin Feng any chance to regret. After all, why did he follow Huzi to the hospital? Uncle Lin Feng, who was never afraid of any difficulties, turned his face away when the nurse raised the syringe. He even used one hand to cover his eyes. The nurse looked at the handsome man and laughed. Why are you afraid of injections? I'm not scared, I'm just dizzy. Lin Feng's handsome face was obviously a little uncomfortable. It was probably the first time that the nurse had seen someone so handsome and funny. She laughed and loosened her grip. Yun watched from the beginning to the end. Just as Lin Feng was about to thank the nurse after he finally got through the ordeal, Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He was dragged over by someone. Lin Feng was confused. What are you doing? You haven't even fastened your belt properly. How are you going to strike up a conversation? With that, Yun reached out and grabbed the belt on Lin Feng's waist. The nurse, who was standing at the side, was completely dumbfounded. Were the relationships between men nowadays so good? What are you waiting for? Aren't you leaving? After Yun helped him buckle his belt, he held his neck and brought him out of the injection room. Why hadn't he changed his bad habit of seducing girls? They were so close that Lin Feng could smell the scent on his body as soon as he breathed. It was very clean and refreshing, completely different from a rough man like him. Hey, let go, let go. Lin Feng was so busy trying to free his neck that he didn't notice how red his face was. Yun released his grip and glanced at him. Is your fever getting worse? No. Lin Feng didn't think it was that serious now. Yun frowned. Nothing, why is your face so red? Lin Feng felt as if his face was burning. *CK, you talk too much. Wait, let me take a call. Yun gave him a casual look. Lin Feng's caller ID flashed. Hello master, I'm outside. I just received someone. My body? My body is fine. Well, much better. Go back and rest well. The deep voice was especially piercing to Yun ears. Are you done? Yun raised his hand and circled him. Once you're done, follow me to the club to report. Lin Feng apologized to the other side of the phone and hung up. He felt cold again, so he pulled up the collar of his coat. Go to the club now. At this hour? Yun took out his phone and showed him his WeChat. It seems like something happened to the team. Upon hearing this, Lin Feng didn't say anything else and got into the car. Something had indeed happened to the team. Because of an interview from the international media. He was from country H. He was a support player. It was precisely because the other party played a support role that he couldn't tolerate it. The Asian Cup against the Supreme Alliance? The team that doesn't even have enough members? As a foreign team, I advise China to reconsider. We don't wish to compete with such a team. Anyone who participates in esports has to respect the competition. I hope China can bring out their strongest ability to face us. The media hadn't expected him to be so direct. I heard that Supreme Alliance has an almighty joining, the God Team controller Rao Rong. You should have heard of him. Rao Rong? I'm sorry, I've only heard of the team controller from country H. I've never heard of this name. That person laughed. It was obvious what he meant. You can get their strongest support to have a solo match with me, let's try it out. Supreme Alliance rarely had any support players. In the past, it had always been 2 assassins, followed by Fatten and archers. It was mainly a fast-paced match. Other than Coco and Yao Yao, there wasn't anyone else who played support. Coco wasn't in a good condition to compete. Yao Yao mostly played sorcerer support. If they didn't accept this match, it would be too frustrating. How dare an opponent's support do that? But they didn't have anyone suitable to compete. Moreover, it wasn't a good time to compete at this juncture. If they lost, it wouldn't just be scolding online, it would be a humiliation to their countrymen. But the most important thing was here. The committee is asking us how confident we are in winning the solo match. If we win, Supreme Alliance will be participating in the Asian Cup. Feng Yi switched off the video, the sly smile on his face gone, replaced by calmness. You heard it, it's the support solo match. This meant that it didn't matter how strong Rao Rong, Yin Wuyao, or Yun Hu were. It wasn't a good situation since they weren't support players. Should we let Coco go? Lin Feng asked, sending the situation to Bo Jiu. Feng Yi's gaze was calm as he stood up. We have to win this match. I don't approve of using the country's reputation to gamble for the sake of competing. Coco didn't reply. Recently, he had been focusing most of his energy on the livestream. Since his captain wasn't around, he hadn't adjusted his state of mind. The meeting room was silent. Yun Hu had just returned and he was faced with such a situation. There should have been a welcome party or a reunion party. But peace never came. It was probably because they were in the same industry. Esports had to deal with the internet. Even now, there were still many people talking about Spade Z online. Even if they didn't know the entire truth. There were those who said they liked it, knowing that it wouldn't be recognized by the officials, but they still insisted on doing it, creating a topic of discussion. Some fans didn't care about the survival of a team, they just wanted to do what they liked and do whatever they wanted. Even when Rao Rong joined Supreme Alliance, there were people who laughed. Rao Rong replied, "No, hee." At this moment, regardless of the situation, Supreme Alliance was at its darkest. Support. If Little Spade was around, they would have been able to win this match. But now, I'll compete. Suddenly Shui Yaoyao stood up, her gaze dark and her palms sweaty. I'm doing well with my support skills. Feng Yi glanced over, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. He's a world-class professional player, even though he's a newbie like you. Shui Yaoyao glanced down at the screen. When she glanced up again, her gaze was firm. I'm also a member of the Chinese national champions. Our Supreme Alliance isn't as weak as he thinks. Feng Yi noticed her gaze, glancing over. The moment the screen darkened, the word 9 was clearly reflected. Seems like Little Spade trusts you. Feng Yi chuckled. At this moment, Feng Shang opened his mouth, stuttering. I too trust Yao Yao. Feng Yi arched a brow, his gaze sweeping over the members, including the two new almighties. What do you think? Solo? One word. It wasn't just cool, it was also trust, the answer of the entire team. Yao Yao turned back, looking at her teammates, her heart tightening. You spent 10 hours a day practicing your support skills, studying so many videos and finding people to practice with. Yin Wuyao looked suave with a cigarette in his mouth. A record of over 1,000 matches and 80% win rate. Yao Yao, you can do it. Rao Rong chuckled, returning to his earliest gaming days. You're the only flower in the team, what else can you do other than support? Let's make use of this opportunity to practice with them. Did you forget that Spade Z is a girl too? Lin Chintao reminded. Rao Rong stilled, he had really forgotten. Lin Feng bolted upright. No BB, to borrow Little Spade's words, beat them until they call you daddy. Sister Yao, we're all behind you, don't be careless, beat them until they cry. Can you not be so filthy in front of a girl? I'm impressed. What should I say? Make them cry? Shut up, didn't your PE teacher teach you Chinese? Shui Yaoyao watched the members of Supreme Alliance. They fought and kicked each other. Almighty Lin was still around, Almighty Yun was coming, and even Almighty Rao had joined them. She had never felt this way before. She didn't want to lose this match. It would be a lie to say that they could do it again. She wanted to do something for the team. She wanted that person to return to the esports arena one day. That FC king with top-notch maneuvers, elegant positioning, and a barren land, he was born to be here. As long as Supreme Alliance qualified, more people would know why the youngster was participating in the competition. Fire? It had never been. But the blood that filled her chest, ready to boil at any moment, was witnessed by others. Every single time. When she won, she would turn her head and see this bunch of idiotic teammates. When you lose, there will always be someone who will take the blame before you do. Her head would be lowered, more upset than anyone else, but she didn't forget to tell her, it's okay, we still have a chance. This time, it was her turn to fight for this chance. Shui Yaoyao glanced down, swiping open her phone. There was only one sentence. Yao Yao, believe in yourself, you can do it. The sender didn't need to be stated. It was as though that person wasn't in the team anymore. She had been cursed into the dust. She had never forgotten that when the team needed her, she would appear once again even if she was far away. Shui Yaoyao smiled, tears in her eyes. She suddenly recalled what Almighty Rao had said when he came to report to Supreme Alliance. Why did I join? Simple, my dream teammate is here. Supreme Alliance. They couldn't just disappear like that. Chapter 1153. At that moment, in the hidden troops at the border, the hunter did not expect that he would be punished, but he would also be watched by the boss. Wasn't boss busy? Why did he have the time to watch him? Hunter's scalp turned numb. He wanted to gossip with his team but realized that they were all gloating over his misfortune. He was the only one who had to run over 10 laps with weights. He felt that boss's gaze on him was exceptionally cold today. Could it be that he had disturbed something just now? No, it couldn't be. It was as though Hunter had been enlightened. He looked at the man standing on the track as though he was looking at a ghost. The moment he looked over, he was frozen by his gaze. His neck shrunk back. Oh my God, boss's aura was still so strong. Why would boss like it when someone was pressuring him? But if it wasn't because he liked him, why would boss torture him so cruelly? Out of energy? Chinamo looked at the person running, his voice calm. If you're out of energy, run 2 more laps. Yes, sir. Hunter was about to cry. His young master was such a devil. He shouldn't have entered at that moment. That group of treacherous villains would make him be the first to stand out. As Hunter ran, he glanced at the few people watching. Don't think that he wouldn't notice them just because they were in hiding. Chinamo swept the training ground another glance, reaching out to pull his jacket up before walking towards the west side. Hunter heaved a long sigh of relief. He's finally gone. The moment Chinamo left, the few people crowded over. Wolf was the first to speak. What did you see just now for boss to treat you like that? He had been tricked again. Hunter wanted to stop. Magician reminded him. You still have 2 laps. Remember the last time someone stopped at 100 meters, how long did boss let him run? Hunter gritted his teeth and continued running. Hey, don't just run, tell us. The few of them ran with him. Hunter didn't stop, scoffing. I'm not talking. Magician stated his conditions. 1 pair of Zhonghua. Never submit to power, never corrupt wealth. This is the foundation of a soldier. Hunter panted as he spoke. Magician spoke again. I'll wash your stinky socks for 3 days. This time, the hunter turned his head around. 1 week. 5 days. Magician gritted his teeth. No more. The hunter chuckled again. 1 week, not 1 day less. CK, tell me? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll wash you too. Magician said angrily. The hunter first looked up at the starry sky, then at his belt. CKU. What do these 2 things have to do with each other? Magician wanted to beat someone up. The hunter was still running. I told you to read more books, but you didn't listen. You can't even understand such an obvious meaning. On a dark and windy night, the leather belt is in pairs. What does that mean? Sleep. What do you mean sleep? Speak clearly. Magician was a little confused. Wolf and the rest also felt that this hunter's language was too poor. The hunter was unafraid of death. Do you really want me to repeat what I saw? Nonsense. If not, who would want to wash your stinky socks? Hunter said, I'll say this first. After you hear this, don't spread it. If you do, boss will definitely know that I said it and I'm dead. Alright, hurry up and say it. Gossip shouldn't be spread. He was too naive. Would it still be gossip if he didn't spread it? Hunter was finally done running. He cleared his throat and said, when I went in, I saw number 10, the new recruit, pressing down on the boss. He said to the boss, say, aren't you a man? What exactly did he say? Hurry up. Hunter shut his eyes and said fiercely, he said, I'm thinking about how to sleep with you. Are you going to let me sleep with you? In an instant, the training ground was in complete silence. Even Wolf was stunned. Magician, who was usually expressive, thought he was hallucinating. He stuttered, why you're saying that's what the recruit said to boss? What else? Hunter's heart was filled with tears. Would boss punish me like that? Magician trembled. He shook his head and muttered, scary, it's too scary. Hunter panted. The scariest thing was that boss didn't push him away or ask him to scram. He even said that he passed the housekeeping test. Is it possible that boss treasures talents? That was the only possibility Magician could think of. Hunter glanced at him. Treasured to the point that he would sacrifice himself and sell his body? Boss, is he that kind of person? No, boss was the type that could kill you with a single glance. Moreover, if you wanted to sleep with him, he would kill you with a single shot. Magician had too many thoughts. The others around him were in deep thought. Only Wolf spoke at this moment. You mean boss did it willingly? Willingly being suppressed? Everyone's eyes widened. F*ck, that was even more terrifying. Gossip spread at an astonishing speed. At this moment, Bojio was still lying on the bed. She was slightly dispirited seeing that the Almighty hadn't recovered after a long time. He didn't have to hide from her, right? Chinemo didn't go back. Instead, he went to the military supply department. The supply department was like the mini supermarket in the school. But the items here were more simple. They mainly sold cigarettes. Even in the military he had to smoke. The soldier was about to take out the soft Zhonghua. Chinemo said, "No cigarettes this time." No cigarettes? The soldier was confused. What did the Major General want if he didn't want cigarettes? Only these? Chinemo pointed to a row of items on the shelf. It was probably because there weren't many people using it and it wasn't eye-catching. Those were lollipops, the most ordinary kind. The recruits in the military would need to replenish their sugar intake at times. But that was also during high-intensity training. "Sir, that's all." Chinemo kept the lollipops and swiped his wallet. "I'll take them all. How much?" The Major General spent money to buy sweets? The soldier was shocked again. He opened his mouth and said, $1 for one. $6 for 6. Chinemo took a $10 note. It wasn't possible for such cheap sweets to have chocolate flavor. But if someone dared to be picky, she wouldn't even be able to eat such sweets. The supply department wasn't an ordinary supply department. Most of the time, the things you bought would reflect your inner thoughts. Hence, the person with the code name doctor would sometimes stay in the supply department when he wanted to understand everyone's mental health. It could be said that he was completely shocked at this moment. Boss, that devil was here to buy sweets. Was he kidding? What was going on? Doctor didn't even have the mood to pretend anymore. He rushed out from the other side. He didn't want to show too many flaws. After Chinemo paid the bill, he pretended to be calm and said, "Boss, you definitely didn't buy sweets for yourself." Normally people would try to deny it. His boss glanced at him and put his hand into his pocket with a mocking expression. "Nonsense. Doctor, F*ck, how was he supposed to continue the conversation? Who did he buy the sweets for?" Chinemo kept the things and walked over with long legs. He acted as though there was no one else around. His side profile was still elegant and handsome. Doctor spoke again. Boss, I feel that your mental state isn't normal. You should sit down and have a good chat." This wasn't normal. What exactly happened? Chat. Chinemo arched a brow. His voice was clear and elegant. "I don't have anything to chat with you. Eat more sweets when you're free. It'll cure your poisonous tongue." Doctor. "Boss, you really didn't consider my feelings when I was being insulted by a devil who could pierce my heart with a single word." He was going crazy. Should he report such an abnormal situation to the general? But his young master seemed to be in a normal state of mind. He seemed to be sneering a little more than usual. Doctor held on to his document. His gaze deepened. He couldn't understand what was going on. Chinemo himself was extremely nonchalant. In the bedroom on the second floor. After Bojio sent the message, she felt a little tired. This was different from when she was in the dormitory. This was where the Almighty slept. The smell was the same as when she was young. It was easy to calm her nerves. In a daze, she felt sleepy, but at the same time, nighttime was the best time. How could she spend it like this? Hence, she seemed to be asleep. She wasn't wearing her military cap. Her military jacket was placed on the chair at the side. Other than her face, everything else was pale. It accentuated the cold color of her face. Yes, he was handsome, but he was very dark. That was the scene Chinemo saw when he entered. A certain someone had already occupied his bed. She wasn't sleeping properly either. She lifted her head and smiled mischievously when he entered. "Come down." Chinemo unbuttoned his shirt as he spoke to the person on the bed. Bojio sat up. She crossed her long legs and yawned lazily. "Didn't you ask me to sleep here?" "I'm the one sleeping here, not on the bed." Chinemo walked over slowly. Bojio narrowed her eyes. Her posture was cool. "Where should I sleep?" "On the floor." Chinemo sat down. Bojio was awake now. Sleep on the floor? How was she going to take advantage of him? "Brother Mo, doesn't your conscience hurt letting a weak young lady sleep on the floor?" Bojio laughed lightly. She didn't seem to have any intention of going down. Chinemo glanced over with his beautiful peach blossom eyes. "Weak young lady? Where?" Bojio reached out and pointed at herself. Chinemo wrapped the person's hand with a smile that wasn't a smile. but there was a special warning in his voice. Even if you want to give yourself the image of a white lotus, you have to see if you look like one. Your face is so black that you don't look like a delicate young lady at all. Are you going down yourself or do you want me to throw you through the window, MMH? Sir, I completely respect Captain's decision, Bojo replied, standing up in a carefree manner. China Mo frowned. If she dared to fall, he would kick her out of the military. Bojo wasn't a naive girl. She wouldn't fall in a daze. She grabbed a blanket and laid it on the floor before finding a pillow. But it was a pity. She had been imagining taking advantage of the Almighty for so long, but there wasn't a single one. The night became quiet, especially after all the training in the military had ended. In a place like the border, there was no one within 800 miles. At night, there were only scattered stars and the faint sounds of insects. Both of them removed their jackets. When Chinamo removed his jacket, Bojo glanced back. She caught sight of him standing tall by the window, his back slightly bent as he removed his camouflage jacket. His black hair was messed up, exuding a lethal sexiness. As if noticing her gaze, Chinamo turned his head and looked at her. He even lifted the corner of his lips. You want to see? Bojo glanced over, suppressing the heat. She turned back to continue admiring him. The Almighty obviously didn't intend to give her the chance. He removed his jacket and lifted the military blanket on the bed. After lying down, he lifted his beautiful chin slightly. Switch off the lights. He even ordered her to switch off the lights. Really, she was like a little princess. It was obvious that Bojo's actions were carried out according to her wishes. After switching off the lights, she realized that the room was too quiet. It was so quiet that she could almost hear the sound of his breathing when he turned around. When Bojo laid on the floor, her thoughts were still pure. Later on, she probably wanted to take another look at him, so she tilted her head over. When the moonlight shone in, she could clearly see his figure. He was still sleeping in the same position, just like a royal from the 19th century. It reminded her of when the Almighty was young. He was also like this. She probably never understood why a child would be so particular about sleeping postures. Whenever she asked, he would reply, "Little Bojo, are you an idiot?" It had been a line that hadn't changed for so many years. Bojo tilted her head again. She felt a slight chill and wanted to pull the blanket up. She had thought it through after all. When it came to kissing, it was best if both parties were willing. She couldn't be too hooligan. Girls had to be reserved. Even though she had nothing to do with being reserved, she still had to act on the surface. If she chased him too fiercely, the Almighty would probably find an excuse to throw her away. The gains wouldn't make up for the losses. The moment this thought left her, the person who was lying on the bed suddenly moved. He only needed 2 steps to walk from the bed to her side. With the length of the Almighty's legs, he only needed 1 step. The moment Bojo opened her eyes. Through the blanket, he placed one hand on the side of her face. His tall nose bridge was almost touching hers. The scent of mint and tobacco surrounded her and the starry sky seemed to be imprinted in his eyes. It was a little bright but not completely bright. There were faint fragments flowing through them. Little Bojo, did you do it on purpose? On purpose? Bojo arched a brow. She didn't understand. You purposely moved so that I wouldn't be able to sleep. Chinamo lowered his body further. His eyes swept over her lips and his gaze deepened. Chapter 1154. The sweet taste of the fruit spread from the corner of her mouth, spreading to the tip of her tongue. It was a familiar feeling. Bojo frowned, slightly depressed. Was this a lollipop? Chinamo seemed to like seeing her like this. After gagging her mouth, he retracted his hand, his breath still lingering. Bojo watched his eyes. She had waited for so long and the Almighty was only giving her a candy? It felt as though she had already taken off her pants and he was showing her this. Bojo shifted her gaze downwards, her lips slightly downcast and her ears drooping. It was all a routine. What happened to the kiss? What is it? Chinamo arched a brow, finding it amusing. That face seemed to carry an air of nobility. You don't like it? Bojo bit the candy, remaining silent. Chinamo pinched her face, his voice cold. Did you think I wanted to kiss you? You dream about it every day. Bojo. The Almighty would never understand the concept of being friends if he didn't expose it. Eat the candy and go back to bed. Chinamo tilted his body and laid beside her. He looked very handsome. He lifted his chin again as though telling her to go where she should go. Bojo bit the candy, stretching her arms out, wrapping them around the Almighty's waist. She smiled. I'm not going, let's sleep together. Chin-mo laughed mockingly, pinching the youngster's chin. Little Bojio, who gave you the courage to say that? The candy gave me the courage. Bojio had the candy in her mouth, her words muffled. Anything else? This time, Chin-mo didn't push her away. Perhaps it was because the thing in his arms was too soft, or perhaps it was because when she spoke, the warmth hit his chest. He knew she was already an adult, the Z he had once admired, but he still felt that she was still young. If he rejected her too much, she would suffer from puberty. His thin lips moved slightly, his voice indifferent. Even if I do, it won't be yours. Brother Mo, I think we have to be sincere, we can't always be at Sundra little princess. Bojio smiled, her lips curved. What do you think? Chin-mo chuckled, his gaze turning cold. Go to bed. After Bojio was pushed away, she was confused. She had just started the first step of seducing him. How did it end so fast? She wanted to hug him again, but the Almighty wouldn't let her. She couldn't even get close to him. He did not take advantage of her at all. The Almighty guarded against her like a wolf. Bojio had no choice but to lie on the bed. She turned around twice before her gaze landed on the figure on the ground. She smiled lazily. Brother Mo, are you afraid that I'll do something to you and you won't be able to control yourself? You also know that you are a hooligan? Chin-mo closed his eyes, replying slowly. Bojio was at her wit's end. The Almighty wasn't even going to fall for her goading. Come up, I'll just have a good sleep since I can't beat you in a fight. If you're really worried that I'll do something to you, you can just handcuff me, Bojio replied in a gentlemanly manner. Chin-mo opened his eyes, glancing towards her. Our arrogant little princess doesn't sleep with anyone. Bojio. Fine, since he emphasized the words Sundra little princess, it was probably hopeless. She knew that the Almighty was a vengeful person, but she had underestimated the way he held a grudge. He would attack without leaving a trace. She licked the candy with the tip of her tongue. It was still sweet. Even her heart started to soften. Actually, she understood. It was rare for the military to have such things. She understood what it meant when he bought it for her. Ever since she was young, that person had always treated her like this. He disciplined and indulged her at the same time. But this time it was too hard to chase. Bojio glanced over once more. Chin-mo was riled up by her gaze. His peach blossom eyes deepened in the night, but his tone didn't change. There was a hint of hoarseness in his lazy voice. Are you thinking of not being able to get off the bed tomorrow? No, it's just a little cold. Bojio wasn't lying. The military blanket was too thin. At the border, the temperature difference between day and night was huge. Moreover, this military unit was originally in an uninhabited area. After autumn, the nights were even colder. If it wasn't for the deal with Boss Tang, she would have come to the military camp. She probably wouldn't have been able to personally experience how that person had lived for many years. The favored son of the heavens, the grandson of the Qin family, had a different attitude after putting on the military uniform. There were too many people here who could live as they pleased like ordinary people. But they chose to stay stationed at the border where there weren't many resources. In order to protect that line, they could endure anything. Just for the people living behind them. When they woke up, they would see the hustle and bustle of life. In this world, there were many types of love. China's soldiers were mostly silent and hard, like the snow in the Kunlun Mountains never melting. They stared at this place as though saying, I hope you never see the smoke and flames of war in this lifetime. Perhaps the people here didn't even know. That person, he should be standing in the esports arena, shining brightly. That was what he loved the most. But, in order to better protect this land, he even threw away his favorite things. Bojio looked at the cold and tall figure. Her chest seemed to be filled with something. No matter what she had experienced, no matter how many things had happened, she probably couldn't forget that even at such a time, that person would still take the time to buy candy for her. His thin lips curved into a smile. He felt that the tip of his tongue was exceptionally sweet. He pressed it against his canine teeth and lifted the military blanket a little. At the start, when he heard that she was cold, Chin-mo didn't intend to care. The military was like this. If they couldn't adapt, they should have left long ago. But when he heard the rustling sound of the blanket being lifted for the third time, Chin-mo got up from the ground. Chin-mo got up from the ground, reaching out to hug the person on the bed through the military blanket. Bojio was still lifting the blanket. When she glanced sideways, she saw that ridiculously handsome face. She wanted to hug him back. Chin-mo looked at her and said slowly, There aren't any protective measures here. Are you going to wait until I can't take it anymore before you can settle down? That kind of voice sounded cold. But the meaning in her bones made Bojio pause. She didn't move. After getting the effect he wanted, Chinamo wanted to close his eyes even though his entire body was burning. But he didn't expect it. The youngster lifted the blanket and covered him. Her good-looking face was still a little embarrassed. Her fingers were already pressing on his belt. When she looked up again, her exquisite and beautiful shoulder bones were exposed due to her movements. It was like a drug entangling her. Why do you have to endure? I can help you. Chapter 1155. The wind outside the window was strong. The lights outside were on and the shadows of the gangsters could be vaguely seen. There were only two people in the military uniform. Chinmo's gaze deepened. There was a pleasant smell on her lips. It was light with a hint of sweetness. It was like a lotus flower in a quiet valley. It slowly lingered from the tip of his nose to the side of his ears. Even when she was doing something, there was a smile on her lips. When she turned her body slightly, her face was beautiful but her aura was clear. Her shirt was pulled open a little. It was loose after all. Her fair collarbone could be seen clearly. What was worse was that she had already reached out her hand. As she moved, her collar drooped even more. He could vaguely see the small lace under the bandage. It was just for a moment. Chinmo's gaze darkened completely. His Adam's apple moved and he held her wrist with extreme heat. He didn't push her away. Because he couldn't push her away anymore. The smell on her body was like incense lit in the night. It was light but alluring. In the darkness, the temperature kept rising. Bojio felt as though all the energy in her body had been sucked out. Because that face was too mesmerizing. And his deep and husky breathing beside her ear. It was so oppressive that it was magnetic. The breath beside her ear made her whole body go numb. Not to mention where his hand was placed. Brother Mo. She opened her mouth. He interrupted her. He looked into her dark eyes. The color was bottomless and a little hot. Didn't you say you would help me? Bojio could hear his heartbeat. It was heavy and loud. Even his breathing was different from usual. You can do whatever you want to me. His words seemed to be enticing her. But this kind of enticement was easy to get addicted. No one would have the chance to see Chinamo like this. He pressed against her head. In order to get her, even his aura was chaotic and noble. It was the most bewitching. Especially when he looked at her like that. His black hair hung down. Even the corners of his eyes were filled with viciousness. When his fingers tightened, he looked like an extremely handsome devil. She couldn't resist at all. Her whole body would heat up even if it was just this appearance. Accompanied by his deep and heavy breathing, the sound of his heartbeat would be amplified. They were so close that she couldn't retreat even if she wanted to. He held her hand in his palm. The temperature of his fingertips was like ice, but it was also different. Because that handsome face, which had always been indifferent and noble, was now tainted with something else. Bojio felt an inexplicable dryness in her throat. She couldn't handle the Almighty at all. Hey brother Imo, that's enough. Bojio's wrist started to ache as she spoke. Chinamo arched a brow and glanced at her, his voice slow. Obviously not enough. Bojio lowered her voice. It's good for your health. It wasn't much at first. Chinamo leaned closer to her ear. It was all because of a certain someone's promise to help me. Bojio tilted her head, her ears slightly red. Isn't 40 minutes enough? You should know this the best. At this point, Chinamo laughed. In the night, his voice was very alluring. After all, you were once a beneficiary. Bojio didn't say anything. She had lost completely in this aspect and couldn't get back at him. Chinmo's gaze dimmed for a moment before he suddenly pushed her away. Bojio sat up. Where are you going? Take a cold shower, idiot. With that, Chinamo entered the bathroom again. Bojio glanced up at the ceiling, waiting for the heat to subside. When the tip of her nose touched the pillow, she could still smell the musk on the Almighty's body. She closed her eyes and couldn't help but open the window. The night breeze blew in, extinguishing the temperature in the room. When Chinamo walked out, he saw this scene. He frowned and carried her up, throwing her back onto the bed. Do you want to freeze to death? The water from his hair dripped onto her eyelids. She blinked and was about to use her hands to rub when someone pressed her down. The next moment she felt the touch of a towel. It was very light. Again and again. Those who didn't know better would have thought she was a porcelain doll. I was too hot just now. That was the first thing she said when she opened her eyes. Chinmo's fingers slid past the corner of her eyes. You were complaining about the cold just now. It was hot after that. Bojio didn't think much when she said this. Chinmo chuckled, his fingertips touching her lips. It was unclear what he meant. After that, she really couldn't drive as well as the Almighty, especially in this aspect. Bojio closed her eyes, pretending that the demon in front of her didn't exist. However, the slight coolness between her lips still made her heart beat faster. This time the Almighty was dressed especially tightly. Even his military jacket was tied neatly. When the cloth pressed against her chest, it felt a little itchy. Bojio moved uncontrollably, but the man held onto her waist, his breath following. Is it still hot? Emimich. In certain aspects, the person in his arms was especially direct. She had a temperament that was in between a youngster and a young lady. Chin Mo exerted more strength, pulling her into his arms. His deep voice rang in the night, extremely magnetic. Let me help you this time. Bojio wanted to say no, but who would be able to resist his methods? When the bandage was removed, Bojio's head was already swollen from the dizziness. Her heart was thumping wildly in her chest. Sometimes Chinemo was right. There weren't many people like Bojio. When her thin lips opened, it was like a drug, making one want to lock her in his arms and break her completely. But Chinemo didn't forget that they were in the military, the time and place weren't right. He tried his best not to look at her. But when she wrapped her arms around him, it was as soft as porcelain, reminding him how fragrant it was. He had tasted it before, tasted it without any restraint. Because of this, he felt that the sound that came to his ears was too alluring. It was so subtle that it seemed like it could emit a fragrance. She was in his arms, leaning against him so softly. When she raised her head, the faint mole under the moonlight shone faintly. All of this clearly fell into his eyes. She was like the seductive woman in his dreams. Under the thin layer of sweat, she was like a demon from the bottom of the sea, giving off an extreme beauty. That was the original sin. No one could escape. And he had never intended to let go. This person could only be his. Chinmo's eyes dimmed, his thin lips moving slightly. Chapter 1156. Bojio stilled. The coldness on his thin lips calmed her down. He held her chin, his entire body close to hers. There was still the smell of smoke, but it was very faint. She wanted to tilt her head, but he reached out, wrapping his hand around her short black hair, pressing it behind her head. The tip of his tongue probed. After such a gentle and delicate kiss, even her breathing was messed up. She sucked until her entire body was numb, her mind blank. Until everything was over. That was when she realized that her clothes had been pulled. The heat against her body hadn't subsided. But after she stopped him, he stopped. That person stopped moving, then smiled and said in a low voice, "Feeling good?" Bojio didn't say anything. She felt that it was blasphemous to do such things to the Almighty in his military uniform. She wanted to move, but he pressed her into his arms, his entire body cold. "Do you really want me to go crazy? Close your eyes and sleep, that's the first option. The second option, I'll pack you up and chase you away." Little Princess, Bojio thought to herself. He had already stood up. He probably couldn't sleep, so he walked over to his desk. Then he took out a pack of cigarettes from the drawer. He tilted his head slightly. Under the light from the fire, she could faintly see his elegant side profile. He didn't shift his gaze away from her. He held the cigarette in his mouth, raised his head and blew out the smoke. He tugged the collar of his military uniform, trying to suppress something that was surging out of his body. Bojio felt that this Almighty was very cute. That's right, cute. Even though he was suppressing it, he was still extremely aloof and cold. His aura was still full of malice. It was easy to be mesmerized. She wanted to reach out and touch his hand to see if it was soft. Bojio gave it a try. But it wasn't his hand she touched, it was his face. She held it with both hands, the corners of her lips slightly curved. He almost blurted out, "Be my boyfriend, will you? I can give you the best things in the world." He allowed her to do as she pleased, his thin lips pursed. "Do you want to die?" Bojio laughed. "No, I want to kiss you." Chin-mo paused, a familiar warmth returning to his lips, but his tone didn't change. "Shut up if you don't want to be thrown out, little gangster." Bojio arched a brow. She remained in that position, tilting her head and planting a kiss on the side of his face. It was just a touch, a goodbye. Chin-mo paused with the cigarette in his mouth. His dark eyes were beautiful enough to move anyone's heart. But he could only see one person. It was already late at night when he really fell asleep. The rumors in the army caused the old commander to be in a mess. What's going on? As he said that, he turned around and said to his adjutant, "Do you believe that cold brat can endure being suppressed by others?" Report, "I don't believe it." The adjutant puffed out his chest and raised his head. This rumor is too ridiculous. The old general thought for a while. Do you think he'll keep his only child? There were many good technical soldiers in the army. However, it was very rare to see someone who excelled in jungle combat and had good electronic skills. That was why he was such a treasure. The adjutant felt that his old general had asked him a question that was too difficult to answer. They wouldn't be able to guess Demon Chin's thoughts. At first, he thought he would get an answer the next day. But before the answer came, the army received a mission to carry out a hostage rescue. There wasn't any warmth. Everyone went straight to the gathering point. Chapter 1157. Under such circumstances, everything happened quickly. They could even see the Almighty's back view as he walked out of the room. But when the time came, all of this would disappear. At this moment, Prince finally experienced the speed of this place. Everyone had to bring 3 items. A gun, a watch, and a black mask. It was more impactful than in the movies. Because in the real world, every Special Forces soldier rarely showed their faces when they were on the move. When they came, they were like a pack of wolves, their gaze determined but silent. No matter how many questions Prince had, he wouldn't ask the youngster beside him at this moment. At this moment, everyone was focused on their mission. Both the new recruits and the members of the operation team were dressed the same. Her face was covered with a black mask and she held a rifle in one hand. She glanced sideways to adjust the shooting distance. It was as though she was born to be here. It was just that the army would never use the hostage rescue as a chance for anyone to practice. The operation team was at the front. Bojio and the others were at the back, hiding in a place they were supposed to hide. There weren't many hostages because of the narcotics operation. One of them was chased here and along the way he hijacked a school bus. In such a place even the school bus was donated. The road wasn't easy. The driver's leg was injured and they were in the middle of negotiating. They had used all the necessary methods. The 3 of them were experienced. They didn't agree to the hostage exchange. They only wanted unopened bottles of water. They even rejected food because they thought there would be drugs inside. It had been 6 hours since the incident had happened. They didn't accept the food provided here and only ate the small biscuits in the students' backpacks. The students would definitely be hungry. But as compared to hunger, fear was more unbearable. All of them shrunk into their seats, not daring to move after their food was snatched. They looked at the muzzle of the gun, trembling so much that their lips turned white. They were all children. With the long-range gun, every movement in the bus could be seen clearly through the window. There were only 3 of them. It was extremely difficult to deal with them in an instant and not give them a chance to harm others. The 3 of them weren't stupid. Each of them had a child in their hands and tried their best to avoid moving around the window. What was good for the operation was that one of them was seriously injured and needed medicine and medical attention. That man seemed to be their little boss. Bojio shifted the muzzle. When she glanced over, she saw a familiar face. She had seen that face in the video before. He had no specific nationality and was active in the Golden Triangle all year round. He was a member of that organization and was mainly responsible for selling goods. Bojio narrowed her eyes. She lifted the gun and glanced at his mouth. Prince was a qualified soldier, but he was still young. Which country are they from? What are they talking about? Nationality unknown, but... Bojio arched a brow. They need a doctor now, that's their next condition. Prince was stunned. This brat even knew how to read lips. Alright, even if she knew how to read lips, how did she know the gibberish? That's a minor language, right? Prince was still frowning. Chapter 1158. Enter the bus? The negotiator's mouth was dry. He held onto the mineral water bottle but wasn't in the mood to drink. No, that won't do. There are so many hostages on the bus and they are all children. The criminal's emotions aren't stable and the psychological aspect is more important. I know special forces like you are very good at solo battles and ambushes, but the way you talk will determine the safety of the hostages. Chin Mo's face was still covered by a black scarf, so his face couldn't be seen clearly, but his eyes were as black as shattered stars. The first question, I have studied psychology and have relevant certificates in this field. I know negotiation techniques. The second question, the other party spoke in Burmese so I can understand them. So, can you help me prepare the things now? Chin Mo's voice was still calm, but his eyes never left the school bus. The negotiator obviously didn't expect to get such an answer. The expression on his face reflected his thoughts. Almost 7 hours had passed. The person in charge's forehead was covered in sweat. He was afraid that something would go wrong. He couldn't afford to bear the consequences if any of the children were hurt. When he heard Qin Mo's words, he turned. How confident are you? 50-50. Qin Mo wasn't holding onto a gun, but he was wearing a high-end communication earpiece. Even here he could use hand signals to adjust the position of the snipers. The person in charge looked at him and found it hard to make a decision. You've seen how cunning these people are. They aren't idiots. Even if you put on a doctor's white coat, you won't be able to gain their trust. Qin Mo frowned. From a certain perspective, that was indeed the case. He was the soldier who was the least like a major general in the military. Compared to a soldier, Qin Mo's aura was too lazy and indifferent. But it was probably due to the environment he grew up in. When people first saw him, they would feel his aura. From the perspective of this operation, it wasn't an advantage. Right at this moment, Bojio, who had been hiding in the corner, held onto something and leaped down. She landed silently, but her words were clear. I'll go. 2 words. The people who were discussing this matter all stopped. The negotiator could only see Bojio's figure. It was a little thin for a soldier. He couldn't see her face, but he could feel that she didn't look much like a soldier in her uniform. Since when were there special forces like this? Bojio was still holding onto her gun as she walked over. She glanced at Qin Mo with her eyes that weren't covered by the black scarf. Compared to Captain, my looks are easier to lower one's guard. A doctor who isn't that tall wouldn't be able to raise their guard. Besides, Captain, you should know that I'm good at disguising myself. Qin Mo's tone was calm. You have no business here, go back. Bojio didn't move, her eyes dark. Qin Mo's fingers moved. When he looked at that person, there were too many emotions in his eyes. You want me to believe that you can complete the mission? Yes. Bojio straightened. Chapter 11:59. This time the person in charge didn't object. Because there wasn't any more time to say anything. If they delayed any longer, they would miss the opportunity. But Bojio had never seen such a gaze from the Almighty. It was cold with a hint of sparkle. Bojio pulled the black mask over her face, intending to wear the clothes herself. After all, the white coat had been brought over. But before Bojio could reach her hand out, Qin Mo had already taken over the job. That person paused, wanting to say something. But for some reason, even though the person in front of him was wearing a mask, the dark camouflage uniform and the eyes that were exposed outside the black mask were so deep that they couldn't help but take a step back. She came from a military background, but when she met such a man, her heart still raced. His aura was too strong. Wasn't he the armed police from the side? Bojio was surprised, but she still stood there. Honestly, she had never been so obedient before. No matter how words were used to describe it or how beautiful the scene was. But those who were standing there knew that it was extremely fast. He had personally helped her change into the white coat. Even the embedded earphones weren't placed by her ears as per usual. Instead, he had disguised it as a button. It was so precise and fast. The members of the operation team watched from the side, their hearts trembling. They had never seen their boss in such a state before. Even when he was in disguise, he hadn't been this careful. It felt as though he was afraid that something would go wrong and he wouldn't be able to see the person in front of him again. Actually, every time they went out on a mission, boss would make sure everything was in place. But this was the first time he had done it personally. And there was an indescribable feeling. In such a tense situation, no one would think about it. Even if they took a glance, they wouldn't place their attention on it. Once a disguise was involved, the safety factor for such a mission wasn't high. Moreover, the person in the car had a gun. But everyone knew that recruit number 10 was right. He was the most suitable person to wear the white coat because he didn't look like a soldier at all. In addition, the large frame glasses perched on the bridge of his nose had no distinguishing features at all. It completely covered the sharpness of this person. Bojio looked a little timid, as though she was a doctor who rarely interacted with people. What are you doing? The people in the car seemed to be impatient. One of them lifted the child with one hand. Even his facial expression was ferocious. With the blood of a desperado, he pointed the gun at the child's head and said fiercely, "Hurry up and let a doctor in. I'll give you another 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, if I don't see the person I'm supposed to see, I'll kill one person every minute." The child had already begun to cry. His voice was extremely loud, and he was so scared that his entire body was trembling. "Shut up." The man was annoyed by the crying, and he was stuck like this. From a certain point of view, he knew very well that it would be very difficult to escape, but sometimes dragging it out for too long might not be good for them. There was another person lying in the car with one hand pressed against his chest. Because of his injuries, his lips were pale. It was obvious that his injuries were serious. There was a tattoo on his face and his expression was dark. Don't argue with the children. They're crying. Just knock them out. Are their parents here yet? Hearing this, the man hurried over. Yes, boss, can we really get out? He was still afraid. Even if he was a desperado, he didn't want to die. The injured man's breathing was slightly weak. You don't believe in Kawang's method? As long as we follow his instructions, when has it ever failed? Pull the children towards the car window and knock them out. Let the parents watch. Okay. The man did as he said. With a forceful swing, the handle of the gun struck the back of a child's head. In an instant, all the children stopped crying. They were so frightened that their eyes were red and their bodies were trembling. Prince, who was holding a sniper rifle, and everyone else who was carrying out this mission gritted their teeth. They had the urge to press the button and shoot the scum's head. But all of them knew that they couldn't fight. If they were to unleash their anger, what would happen to the children in the car? Wolf was the best sniper in the entire team, other than Chinamo. No one could understand his emotions. He could have killed the child with a single shot from the previous position. But he couldn't fight. Perhaps those who didn't understand soldiers wouldn't know. On the surface they looked strong and taciturn. But on the inside they were a soft and adorable mess. Usually they were like ordinary people who liked to play around. When they saw someone who made a mistake, they would laugh at the side. When they saw the children, they would intentionally suppress their murderous aura. They didn't want to be so serious because they were worried that they would scare the children. Hence, when they saw this scene, their breathing was heavier than usual. Even their breathing was heavier than usual. It was really unbearable. The ones who couldn't control the most were the parents who had arrived at the scene. When the child's mother saw this scene, she fainted immediately. The others were so anxious that they couldn't wait to charge through the defense line. One of them grabbed the person who stopped them, a pleading expression on his face. Ask them what they want. Money? We can give it to them. Give me my child. The news had already spread. No matter how they tried to control it, it would be on the internet. It wasn't because they didn't defend well, it was because of the people in the car. It was to exert pressure, to make them fulfill all their conditions and even to the extent of leaving the country. Everyone was paying attention to this matter. This was also the reason why the person in charge was sweating profusely. Even if there was chaos, it would still be in China. Allowing them to act so recklessly, even if the matter was resolved, they would still be held accountable. But now he wasn't afraid of being held accountable. He was thinking about how to ensure that all of the children returned safely. Even though there were people crying behind him or perhaps in disbelief. In reality, he wasn't confident. He could only place all his hopes on the special armed police sent by the military. Yes, it said special armed police, but it didn't mention the military unit number. I'm done. When Bojio glanced up at the person in charge, there was a coldness that was like the clear waters of the snowy mountains. The person in charge held her hand. Please, you must succeed, the children are more important. There was another layer of meaning to this sentence. This was what all soldiers knew. It meant that if they were discovered, they had to sacrifice themselves to protect the children. Chapter 1160. The rest of them started to prepare. They hid somewhere or found the best vantage point so that they could have a clearer view of the situation in the school bus. That way they would be able to react appropriately in the most urgent situation. However, the entire operation team did not expect that the person who moved the fastest was actually the boss. He held his rifle with one hand, looking like a leopard in the forest as he leaped into the hidden area by the side of the road. Wolf was still hiding, unable to shift his gaze. Sometimes, blocking a line of sight was more important than sniping. Prince wasn't good at long-range shooting, so he could only wait anxiously. But just as he was panicking, he saw a figure climbing up the tree suavely. There was a murderous aura at the corner of his eyes. When he sat on the tree branch, he used the surrounding environment to hide his body, blending into the tree. Prince's eyes widened. The big devil? Wolf also felt that there was an additional person behind him. It was just a feeling. He didn't turn back. But he knew it was his boss. Not many people had seen Qin Mo's long-range sniping skills. Most of the time he was in charge of giving orders, which soldiers should be in which position and how to complete the mission safely. These people would be brought back the way they were when they came out. He was called the captain because he had to be the first to charge deep into the enemy's territory. However, not all missions could be completed based on who was strong enough. Prince watched as the person raised his rifle and placed it on his shoulder. He was like the most silent existence, his breathing moving with the wind. "Boss, what is he trying to do?" Hunter opened his mouth. Magician tilted his head, his face covered in dirt. "Shoot. Boss hasn't held a rifle in a long time, right?" Yes, everyone knew that ever since that incident, Chinamo hadn't held a rifle in a real mission. No matter how good his shooting was, it was in the military because he didn't want to. After around 3 seconds, Magician smiled. Magician smiled. "Does this mean that Boss is really coming back?" The person who raised his rifle and drew out an 800-meter no-man's land with a piece of hay in his mouth. That was enough to scare off anyone who tried to trespass the land. But how did he manage to overcome his psychological issues? Hunter didn't ask this question. Back then they went on that mission together. When he found his boss, his eyes were bloodshot. His gun was placed by his side, his whole body was wet and his wrists were hanging by his side. Back to the army. Regardless of whether it was the higher-ups or the doctors, they all said that Boss had been hypnotized and was no longer suitable for any missions. His military rank would be revoked and he would be sent back to the city. He was the pride of the heavens. They all knew. But who knew? In order to guard this place, his body was full of injuries. During the earthquake, in order to pull a person up, his back was smashed by a heavy object. He had to endure it until he reached the army to get treatment. He was as tough as a mountain. But when the mountain was destroyed, it was like the clear moon in the night sky. Even his departure was silent. Now he raised the gun in his hand and the muzzle followed a single point. That point landed behind the disguised recruit number 10, not leaving him by even an inch. The surrounding people all fell into silence. That was probably the only protection he could provide. He picked up the gun and locked onto one point. There was no mistake. Chapter 1161. Boss, they're here. One of the people in the school bus tilted to the side and looked out of the bus door. The person who was lying on the bus couldn't turn around and looked at the roof. Go check if they're imposters. Impersonation? That person was obviously confused by the environment and couldn't wrap his head around it. Actually, everyone was feeling pressured at this moment. Both the people who were surrounded and the people who were stationed there. Police imposters. The injured person narrowed his eyes. If they are, kill them and use a child as a warning. All right. The person was about to walk out. Wait a minute, check if there are any special forces soldiers around when we go out. Boss, I've seen this before. There aren't any special forces soldiers, there are many armed policemen. It seems like they don't want us to leave. It's better if there aren't any. Pay attention to your surroundings and retreat if you see any signs of trouble. Yes. Everyone was worried that a sniper would appear at this moment. But at such a distance, anyone who wasn't a sharpshooter wouldn't be able to do anything to them. When they had chosen their parking spot, they had already taken this into consideration. Most importantly, the doctor didn't look like a police officer in disguise. The criminal with the gun lowered his head, and his fierce eyes met the man in the white coat. "Where's the medicine?" His voice was harsh. The man in the white coat trembled and stuttered, "It's here." With that, Bojo lifted the toolbox in her hands. The criminal was holding onto a child in his left hand, just in case something unexpected happened. He used the barrel of the gun to move the items in the toolbox. Other than a syringe, there was gauze and some medicine. Boss, he doesn't have a gun, he seems real. The other person was in charge of reporting the situation. Check if he has earphones. The person's breathing was painful. When his voice came out, it was extremely faint. Of course, Bojo heard him, but she pretended as though she hadn't heard anything. She continued to stand there, her fingers trembling. The moment the criminal raised his gun, everyone held their breath. The moment he raised his gun, everyone held their breaths. The position where he raised his gun was aimed at Bojo's head. Prince gritted his teeth so hard that they hurt. The members of the operation team tightened their grip on their guns. Many of them assumed that their boss wouldn't be able to control himself and shoot since no one knew what the criminal was up to. But at this moment, the young man in the white coat took a heavy step back. Then, as if he was scared silly, he squatted on the ground and hugged his head with both hands. Wait. Number 10's hand signal. Others might not be able to see it, but the snipers could see it. Although he was holding his head, it was indeed a gesture. But why couldn't they understand the gesture? Was this a military gesture? What was the meaning of this? His index finger bent forward a little? Anyone who does missions knows that when you're on a mission, you don't do anything meaningless. Therefore, the young man's actions were definitely meaningful, but they really couldn't understand what it was. A unique hand signal from the army? He couldn't tell how many missions Magician and Hunter had completed. But there was one person who knew. Unknowingly, this was Prince's thought as he stood under the tree. He had a feeling that the devil hiding on the tree branch would know what that gesture meant. He didn't know why, but he just had this feeling. In fact, Chinamo did know. Chapter 1162. Which meant, she had asked him not to shoot first. Chinamo knew everything, but he didn't loosen his grip. Even through the sniper rifle, his eyes were as deep as the galaxy in the night sky. The criminal was relieved. The more afraid the doctor was, the lower the possibility of it being fake. Moreover, the person had knelt down just now. It was obvious that he was scared silly. Get up. The criminal reached out and pulled Bojio into the school bus. It was the most dangerous place in the bus. This meant that there would be 3 guns pointed at Bojio's head. That's right, 3 guns. But the moment she entered, Bojio understood who was the most difficult person to deal with in the bus. Even though he was injured, he still had a gun in his hand. Even at this moment, he was still sizing her up with the tattooed man. In the video, he was the one who had shot the tourist. Bojio lowered her lids. She suppressed all her emotions but didn't stop trembling. The tattooed man tilted his head. Yes, the doctor is here. It isn't fake. I will continue watching. I know I won't be captured alive. For such overseas criminals, being captured alive was the most dangerous thing. Being captured alive meant that they would be able to obtain information. Bojio stood there motionlessly. Her black-rimmed glasses made her look extremely weak. The criminal behind her pushed her forward forcefully. Quick. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you can't treat our boss, I'll shoot you. I need a medical kit. Bojio glanced to the left when she said this. This scene made him look like he was scared to death. But in reality, she was looking at her surroundings. She was looking at every location and the criminal's position as well as their overall abilities. 1v3. One of them was lying on the ground, but he needed the most attention. Bojio retracted her gaze. She knelt down with trembling hands and took something out of the medical kit. There was a gun pointed at her head. It was obvious that the criminal had relaxed a lot by now, but he was still very nervous. It was fine as long as he was nervous. Humans would always have flaws when they were nervous. Bojio lowered her lids. She took out the hemostatic forceps. Her lips were hidden in a place that others couldn't see. I've lost a lot of blood. This was nonsense. Which injured person did not lose a lot of blood? Everything was for the sake of a better disguise, so even the words he said were in line with his identity. The tattooed man moved and gave a look to the other side, indicating for the other side to prepare more things. The criminals also received the signal, but they didn't leave. The 3 of them were watching the doctor. They couldn't allow anything to go wrong. If Bojio did anything that didn't match her status, she would be shot in the head. At this time, all the children were really scared silly. Looking at this scene, their little hands grabbed the safety belts, for fear that there would be another scene of a gunshot. Bojio wore medical gloves and took out the last tool from the medical box, an injection needle. The tattooed man frowned. Check. Yes. Both of them were drug dealers. The criminal took the injection needle and didn't find any problems. More importantly, Bojio stuttered, This medicine has stabilizing properties. When treating serious injuries, there would always be anesthetics and stabilizers. This sentence caused the tattooed man's eyes to flicker. Chapter 1163. It was at that moment. Prince, who was standing under the tree, suddenly realized that there was a completely different aura coming from the tree. Like a ferocious tiger coming out of its cage, the man suddenly adjusted the muzzle of his gun, turning it 45 degrees. He was quick and ruthless. Just when Prince didn't know what was going on, a voice rang out. The person in the school bus suddenly raised the syringe in his hand. Just as everyone was looking at the young man with worry in their hearts, his movements were so fast that it was almost a blur to the eyes. The tattooed man who was lying on the ground was shocked. He didn't even have time to move. The hand that was holding the gun had its tendons severed. Everything happened too quickly. It was so fast that the 2 men next to him had just raised their guns. A loud bang was heard. No one knew where the gunshot had come from. But that was the sound. It was the thug who had pointed the gun at Bojio's head. The blood was like a blood mist spreading in the air. The tattooed man screamed out loud. Another gangster standing next to him had already reached out to grab a child. Sniping, no angle. But at this moment, The young man moved his long legs and using the momentum, he leaped forward and kicked the criminal's wrist. Then, the force from the rotation of her body turned the young man's white coat into a weapon in her hand. There was a swishing sound. The white coat fell and covered the criminal's head. The moment he felt the pain and darkness, a second gunshot rang out, breaking through the car window. First, the glass shattered, followed by a headshot. Who was it? Who was that sniper? The same question appeared in everyone's mind. The tattooed man looked at the doctor, who had stopped. He was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat, but his eyes narrowed a little fiercely. Who are you? This was not a doctor at all. He actually didn't see it. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. The tattooed man's heart sank as he looked at the harmless-looking youth. He had never seen this face before, so how could he be so strong? Bojio's face was still stained with blood. Because she had been too fast, she had cut her fingers. However, none of this could affect her temperament. It was a kind of evil that lived in the darkness all year round. After she squatted down, she looked at the tattooed man and smiled. You're asking me who I am? I'm your old enemy. You can call me Daddy. The tattooed man had no way to describe his feelings at this moment. Daddy? He wanted to hit someone, but he could only curl up in pain. Outside the car came the sound of people passing by. She reached out and hugged him, patting his back. She really didn't know how to comfort a child, so she used the same method the Almighty had used to comfort her when she was young. Don't be afraid, big sister will buy you some sweets later, everything is fine now. Your mother is outside, I'll open the car door now. You guys can alight one by one, don't squeeze, you will hurt yourselves. The boy, who had been scared out of his wits, moved a little after hearing that, as if he had come back to his senses. Sometimes, a hug is enough to comfort someone. The little kids knew that the danger was over. One of the bolder ones lifted his head, his fingers tugging the hem of her shirt. He asked shyly, isn't it supposed to be a PLA uncle? Why big sister? Chapter 1164. The people outside were anxious. The tattooed man lying in the car could no longer move. The parents were the first to break through the defense line. Some of them even pushed the guards who were originally standing at the side. But at a time like this, everyone could understand how they wanted to receive it. Compared to the chaos outside. When the children got off the bus, they followed the order of their seats. Bojio arranged for them to form a line. She stood in front of the tattooed man and crippled his other hand. This way she would be more at ease. The children were also covered in blood. Their faces were still filled with fear from what had just happened. One of the children's legs turned to jelly when he took a single step. Bojio reached out to prevent her from falling. She said carefully, walk slowly, there's no rush. The little bean nodded. He was still afraid. However, all of them were very obedient. He sniffled and continued to walk forward. When he walked out of the school bus, his mother hugged him in her arms and he burst into tears. The situation was finally under control. The person in charge heaved a sigh of relief. However, there was another person who heaved a sigh of relief. It was the crown prince. When the devil sat on the tree, his aura was too strong and he only fired 2 shots. 2 shots, no more, no less. Every time the gun was pulled, it brushed past his ear. Prince was the one who saw everything clearly. When that person jumped down from the tree, there was only one thought in his mind. He was a sharpshooter. How could a headshot be made from such a tricky position? No, it was 2. It was mainly because he was fast. Not only was he fast, but it seemed like he had already analyzed the opponent's movements when he raised his gun. His mentality, speed, and combat experience were all factors. The Crown Prince's thoughts were a little chaotic, but this did not affect him from rushing out to enjoy the joy. He was really happy. As long as he saw the group of little beans jumping around with their friends, he would always feel relieved in his heart. Everyone in the operation team put away their guns as if they had never appeared. Prince and Wolf were in the same area as Chinemo. The demon's pocket was bulging as he walked towards the school bus with a spear in one hand. After the smoke subsided, there was a vast expanse of white on the battlefield. The man's back was straight, and he wore a combat uniform with a black band around his wrist. When he passed through the crowd, time seemed to stop. People are looking back. Chinemo didn't seem to care. He pulled the youngster out of the car. Then they gave each other a tight hug. Even that pair of eyes of the night had become so deep that it was completely dark. Bojio paused, sniffing the pleasant peppermint scent. It was different from usual, carrying the smell of gunpowder. She wanted to reach out too, but then she realized that there was blood on her hands and clothes. Brother Imo, I'm dirty. I don't mind. Chin Imo tightened his grip, as though he wanted to knead her into his bones. You don't mind? He returned the hug. Bojio smiled and reached out. This kind of hug was not excessive at this time. After all, the scene just now could be described as a matter of life and death. It was just that the few people who were familiar with their boss were in a state of shock. They couldn't believe that the great demon would do something like that. Previously, when they were carrying out missions, the boss would also revive them when they survived a disaster. But hugs? Chapter 1165. If it hadn't been for his superb marksmanship, they would have suspected that he was a fake boss. The little kid stood at the side, their eyes wide as they watched the scene. His parents wiped their tears. Hurry, thank the two uncles from the People's Liberation Army. The little kids remained silent. One of them tugged his mother's sleeves, leaning towards her ear. One of them is an elder sister. You can't differentiate between genders, don't call anyone good-looking your elder sister. With a smile he ended the topic. But the unforgettable topic was the hug in front of them. Of course, that was an internal matter of the operation team. The person in charge walked over, getting his men to detain the tattooed man. He couldn't walk anymore, but he was still breathing. This proved that the mission had been a success. They had captured him alive. The tattooed man was carried down. When he saw the people wearing black scarves, his first reaction was that they weren't ordinary policemen, they were definitely from the military. But he couldn't tell which military unit they were from since they were all wearing black scarves. Among the onlookers there was a journalist who wanted to record this scene. But Chinamo was the first to notice. He glanced at Magician on the left. Magician took a step forward, blocking the camera. I'm sorry I can't take photos, please hand over the film. Why? Mister, your heroic deed should be reported and let everyone know. This is such a great contribution. Without you, these children would not have been saved. The reporter adjusted the angle, trying to capture the image of Chinamo and Bojio. Was that the disguised doctor who entered the school bus? Magician frowned. This time he didn't hesitate, reaching for the camera. He opened it swiftly and took out the memory card, breaking it into two. What's wrong with you? Don't think you're so great just because you're an armed policeman. Why did you touch my camera? Magician ignored him, returning to Chinmo's side. Boss, it's settled. Retreat, Chinmo said. The person in charge basically understood the situation. The worker was still shouting, unreasonable. I want more people to know how heroic they are. I admire them. Why are these people so arrogant? It's fine if they don't understand, but they even broke my things. In fact, as long as the worker wasn't so selfish, he should understand that not allowing him to film was good for himself. They forced their admiration onto others, but they didn't know that their own actions could very well expose such a mysterious operation team, which would be even more dangerous. A world-class mercenary organization was not weak. Not only would they be able to obtain information from your appearance, but they would also be able to target you based on your clothing, body shape, and combat habits. The person in charge gestured to the guard. The meaning of the gesture was very simple. It was to take that person away. The more he explained, the more information he would reveal. He might as well not say anything. Even he initially thought that the people sent to them this time were armed policemen. But when the person in charge saw one of them pretending to be a doctor and his every move, as well as the two perfect sniping sounds just now that were impossible for an ordinary person to achieve, the person in charge was shocked. He knew that they were not armed police. Special forces appeared in his mind, but he wasn't sure which unit they were from or what their numbers were. These people stood tall and silent. Even their guns were full of strength. When they were silent, one wouldn't even be able to sense their presence. Such special forces. The person in charge's expression changed, but he didn't say anything. The tattooed man wasn't willing to admit defeat. When his eyes swept past Chinamo, it seemed as though they were filled with venom. You are dead. He spoke in Burmese as though he was spitting venomous words. Chinamo didn't even look at him. Blood trickled down the tattooed man's lips. His wrist hung limply, his gaze landing on Bojio's face. Especially you, doctor. At this moment, Chinamo moved. He blocked the man, his thin lips moving slightly. You won't have the chance because you will die in China's prison. The tattooed man's eyes widened in disbelief when he heard that voice. That voice, that demonic presence. The tattooed man would never forget the time when someone had sniped the 10 of them like a ghost. Until the very end, they hadn't been able to locate him. If it hadn't been for reinforcements, he would have lost his life. The memory was too deep. Hence he couldn't forget that voice. It was the person who had destroyed them when they were at their peak, when they had the most believers. How was that possible? Hadn't he been hypnotized? Why was he here? The tattooed man's expression changed. Even after he was sent into the police car, his heart still pounding. It was a fear that was imprinted in the depths of his heart. With the closing of the police car door, everything stopped. The little kids were still standing there, a little afraid but also a little eager to speak. Mommy. Mamich? The older brother is holding on to the older sister as though she's a little kid. Those are the two older brothers, don't mistake them for someone else. But indeed they seem to be holding on to a little kid. Perhaps it was because one of them was too tall and had a black mask over his face. The other was handsome but young. Bojio glanced down at her hand, the wound that the Almighty had treated. Even though the wound wasn't important to her, the Almighty held on to her wrist. But with the Almighty holding her wrist, she could always feel the warmth under the thin skin. It felt like jade. It was obvious that he had other matters to attend to. It wasn't appropriate for him to hold on to her like that. Hence, the people beside their boss watched as he took something out from his pocket and placed it in the youngster's hand. Come over after you're done eating. Bojio glanced down at the thing in her palm, her lips lifting into a smile. Magician, who was closest to them, had been walking normally when he bumped into a tree. Hunter had fared better, at least he hadn't knocked into the tree. But when they saw the scene their reactions were the same, it was a little surreal. Prince opened his mouth wanting to say something. However, when he met the devil's gaze, he quickly looked up at the sky and whistled, acting as though he hadn't seen anything. His heart was filled with gossip. F***ck, what exactly was going on? Wolf remained silent. Silent? But the little kids weren't silent, they turned and asked, Mommy, did you bring sweets? You're still thinking about sweets at a time like this? The mother glanced at her son's blood-stained arm, hugging him. The little kid pouted. That big brother brought sweets for little brother. I saw it, it's orange-flavored. It's good to have a big brother, Mommy. Can you and Daddy give me another big brother? Bring me sweets when he grows up. Hearing that, the mother was stunned. She looked behind her and saw the young man who had been pretending to be a doctor. He had a lollipop in his mouth and one hand was in his pocket. His expression was a little lazy, and the hem of his shirt was being pulled by another child. Big sister, I know Mommy said your little brother. Didn't you say you were going to give me sweets? Come with me. The youngster raised a finger, shaking it. I can't give you this. Why? The little kid was starting to get agitated. The youngster wasn't moved. My captain gave it to me, the meaning is different depending on the person who gave it to me, understand? The little kid obviously didn't understand. Wasn't it just a candy? On the other hand, Prince was conflicted. So the devil's pocket was bulging because of the sweets? The devil, sweets, who would link these two things together? Moreover, the devil coaxed his soldiers by giving them sweets? Wasn't that a little too feminine? Prince imagined that if the devil gave him a piece of sweets, it would be scarier than the end of the world. Prince shuddered and stretched out his hand to rub his arm. The truth proved that Prince was thinking too much. Magician and Hunter stood at the side, their thoughts turning 180 degrees. There's a problem. Of course. Hugging was fine, but giving sweets? When did their boss go down this path? Why do I feel like I'm being tortured? What do you mean? I've never felt as single as I do today. These words were said in a whisper. That was because their boss had completed the final communication with the person in charge here. It was simple, A-level confidentiality. Don't spread it, don't mention it, don't upload any images and don't do any case analysis for the time being. Chin Mo's voice was light, and when it came through the black scarf, it carried a kind of nobility. The person in charge wasn't muddle-headed, he understood. This. He paused before continuing, Comrade, don't worry, we will take care of the aftermath. Usually, when they couldn't control themselves and had to give a detailed explanation of the case, they would look for the local armed police and let them say that they were the ones who completed the mission. In China, some people couldn't even leave their names behind after doing something. That was because they had to deal with more ruthless terrorist organizations. Magician and Hunter listened to their boss's communication, feeling that he had entered the wrong profession for such a strong aura. Especially when their boss was wearing a black mask and his gaze swept over them, he seemed like the boss of Chinatown. His aura was like a mountain torrent. Honestly, boss, you shouldn't have joined the army, you should have become a gangster. The mission was over. Their communication was completed. Chin Mo reached out, switching his phone out of flight mode. In an instant he received a message. "Boss, this is the information you asked us to intercept. It's regarding number 10. Every recruit would have their information intercepted. This was a form of defense for the special forces. Once you were here, you had to be completely transparent." Chapter 1166. Regardless of whether it was the messages she sent or her usual previews, they all appeared on Qin Mo's phone. Every single message was related to the Asian Cup. There was even a request from a certain someone. "Please obtain the qualification for the Asian Cup." That youngster probably didn't ask anyone for such a favor. Hence, even her tone seemed a little stiff. The last message was sent to Feng Yi. Qin Mo knew that it was for him. "The Almighty will go back." Qin Mo's gaze swept past the 5 words and landed on obediently Darling, who was standing not far away with a lollipop in her mouth. Her hand was wrapped in white gauze, and her head was lowered as she spoke to a little bean. Qin Mo didn't know what they were talking about, and under her black hair was a glowing side profile. It wasn't appropriate. The location and time weren't appropriate. The clothes he was wearing weren't appropriate either. Qin Mo tightened his grip as though he was suppressing something. Then he walked over. Bojo seemed to have sensed his approach, glancing up. The little bean wanted to say, "Big brother, your little brother is so petty." Unexpectedly, he was the one to take the initiative. "Captain, this little bean wants to snatch my lollipop." Little bean. Little brother isn't just petty, he's also shameless. Didn't he say he would give in to the little kid? Fortunately, someone was teaching him a lesson. The little bean glanced at the tall big brother. He reached over and grabbed the back of his collar as though he was a sack. His voice was calm. "Let's go." He had to go home and teach the little brother a lesson. Whenever he was disobedient, his father would often do the same. But the little brother wasn't bad. He was just a little shameless, but he had saved them just now. "Mommy, will that big brother bully the little brother?" Magician and Hunter were walking at the back. They could vaguely hear the child's voice in the air. They thought to themselves, "Kid, don't you know our boss is different from normal people? How could he be lecturing you? He's more like spoiling you. If he really wanted to teach him a lesson, he would only ask one question. Do you think you are suitable to be a foreign special forces soldier? If you think you are, come and fight with me." Just this question alone made many recruits retreat in the face of difficulties. But now it was different. Indeed, it was different. Even though Qin Mo had a sense of propriety and restraint, he couldn't resist the strong gossiping heart of the operation team. "Huntsman, it's number 10. You're the one who picked him up. Don't you have any information on him?" Magician tried to find out more. The hunter was furious. "If there was, why couldn't I find out about it? Strange, who is it?" Magician turned his head and looked at the back view of the person in the white coat. He thought about what this recruit had been doing all this while and suddenly froze. F***ck, it can't be, it's that guy? Hunter frowned. "Who is it?" "In Jiang City, when we went to look for boss, he recognized a younger brother." Magician felt it was hard to explain. The hunter was shocked. "Younger brother? Boss?" He didn't seem like the kind of person who would recognize a younger brother. "Because of that person, we suspected that boss was gay." Magician tilted his head. "Now, it seems like he really is gay. Why didn't I think of it just now? The last time we were on a mission, this person pretended to be a member of the film crew and walked right in front of me. I didn't even notice anything strange about him. In the end, boss caught him." Hunter couldn't hear the rest of the conversation. All his thoughts were occupied by one word. Chapter 1167. Magician didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, "Can you explain why our boss gave her candy just now?" He really couldn't explain it. The recruits didn't know and thought that the devil would occasionally be as gentle as a gentle breeze. But they knew that he wouldn't be like that to others. Hunter took a step forward. Magician asked, "What's wrong?" "I suffered a huge blow, I need a break. This is too much of a shock, I wasn't prepared at all." Hunter felt like he was done for. Honestly, the fact that their captain liked the blue child was ridiculous. Magician patted his shoulder. "I can understand your feelings, we felt the same way back then. So, that fellow chased after the troops." Hunter's imagination wasn't bad. Magician glanced up. "You were a witness yesterday." He had witnessed his boss being pressed down. His boss was pressed down. The more Hunter thought about it, the more his world seemed to be collapsing. At this moment, a group of people had reached an uninhabited area. They split up from the rest and headed to the place where the military aircraft could land. Qin Imo glanced over, catching sight of the youngster with a lollipop in her mouth. Her face was black and stained with blood. Little Bojio. MMH? Bojio was surprised that the Almighty would call her name in such a situation. Qin Imo asked leisurely, "Are you done with the candy?" "MMH, there's only a stick left." She sucked on it. But even she hadn't expected the Almighty to ask, "Do you want a kiss?" Bojio's collar was still being tugged at. She felt the Almighty's hand lift the white coat up, and her eyes met the handsome face that was very close to her. The black mask had long been pulled up to his chin, and the dark color made his face look flawless and noble. A few strands of his black hair fell down, blocking his beautiful eyes and brows. Half of his body seemed to be wrapped around her, blocking not only the wind in the forest but also the hunter's line of sight. The sudden intimacy. As his thin lips landed, the scent of tobacco lingered around her. Bojio felt her breath being sucked away. Her heart seemed to be scratched by a furry claw, a layer of sweetness gushing out. It was a light kiss, like a candy hidden in the Almighty's pocket. Both of their lips had the taste of oranges. Traces of numbness came from between their lips and slid over their skin. For a moment, the only thing left in her nose was the unique taste of a man. It was the smell of gunpowder with a hint of mint and tobacco, making it hard for her to let go. Magician and Hunter, who were standing not far away from them, froze. "Boss, are you bullying us because we haven't been in a relationship before? Is that why you're acting so nonchalant? Even if you pull up your clothes like that, we still know how to kiss, okay?" Could it be? Magician and Hunter looked at each other. Based on their understanding of their boss, this meant that he didn't care whether they knew or not. On the other side, Bojio's breathing was erratic. The corners of her mouth curled up faintly. Her head was still half covered by the white coat, and her little face was flushed. Unfortunately, the color of her face could not be seen at all. Chapter 1168. There was a hint of a smile in the Almighty's voice when he said that. It was a classic honey trap. Bojio couldn't guard against it and didn't want to either. Hence, she stood there and allowed the Almighty to wipe his face. As for the destructive gazes from the side, Bojio wasn't bothered. Anyway, it was a good chance for others to know that the Almighty was hers. When Hunter and Magician returned to the military unit, they felt as though they were floating. In the past, they had been gossiping about their relationship as a joke. Now that they were in a relationship, how could they gossip? It was against the rules in the military unit. Boss, why exactly did he do that? Not to mention the ambiguous kiss just now, the candy incident had spread throughout the entire army in less than a morning. Everyone was trying to guess their relationship and naturally the old general heard about it. "What did you say? That youngster gave candy? Was he lying to me? Or was he joking?" The old general took a sip of tea. The adjutant stepped forward. "Reporting, it's completely true, sir." The old general wanted to say something else. The person in question was already standing at the door. He was dressed in his military uniform, standing against the light. His aura made the adjutant, who had been in this position for many years, feel a little fearful. No, he couldn't be fearful. After all, he was still his junior. The old general's reaction would be swift. His gossipy face had turned into a bright smile, like a wise man with many layers of knowledge. "You're here?" The mission was a success. Qin Imo walked in and gave a standard salute, his tone lazy. "I'm sure you've heard." The old general took a sip of tea. "Heard? What did you hear?" "It has nothing to do with me." Qin Imo didn't beat around the bush, going straight to the point. The old general pretended to be confused, turning towards his adjutant. "This youngster is speaking in riddles again. What does he want?" "Reporting, I'm not sure." The adjutant was an honest man, his face turning red the moment he lied. "Since the chief is so concerned about recruit number 10, you should be aware of his recent movements. For example, the rumors about him suppressing me should have reached you a long time ago. Adjutant Lee is a messenger, so it's not hard for him to find out such information. Since the chief insists that he hasn't heard of it as the person involved, I can explain it to him. I have a special relationship with recruit number 10, so it's not suitable for us to go on a mission together. She won't be part of the operation team for this overseas mission." Lee Imo nodded. The old general's expression turned serious for the first time. He reached out and pinched his glabella. "Qin Imo, you aren't an emotional person." Qin Mo's expression turned serious. "Qin Imo, you aren't an emotional person. When someone points a gun at her head, I can't stay calm. If I don't stay calm, I won't be able to complete the mission. The old general looked at him and said, "But today you did very well. It's different outside the country." Even at this moment, Qin Mo's thoughts were clear. We won't have any reinforcements there, we won't be able to disguise ourselves, and we won't even have a path of retreat. The old general had his own insistence. Number 10 is a rare technical soldier. I admit it. When Qin Mo said these 3 words, he could even imagine a certain someone sitting in front of the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Even the coldness in his eyes melted. He smiled faintly. There aren't many people who are better than him in terms of network technology. The adjutant standing at the side. What's with the feeling of being sold? But. With that, Qin Mo paused and glanced at the old general, his tone calm. If it was your daughter, would you let her go to the battlefield? The old general had a daughter, and he had wanted her to get to know this cold boy. He was a soldier, and indeed he had never thought of letting his daughter go to the front line. What kind of place was that? It was a place where people could eat people. Qin Mo smiled, and there was an indescribable emotion in his words. You wouldn't. The old general choked, and for a moment he couldn't say a word. In the end he said weakly, "Cold boy, you are being unreasonable. That isn't your daughter." That isn't my daughter. Qin Mo stood up, stuffing one hand into his pocket. He looked lazy, but in fact there was a glint in the corner of his eyes. He spoke in a casual tone, but the words that came out of his mouth shocked the other 2. That's my life. Just 5 short words. The old general couldn't say another word. Qin Mo stood with his back to the light, and his voice came again. For the mission the day after tomorrow, think of a way to make her stay. This kind of conversation would not be heard by a 4th person other than the 3 of them. After Qin Mo left, the air in the room seemed to have quietened down. After an unknown period of time, the sound of the clock shaking could be heard. The old general knocked on the stainless steel in his hand. Was that fellow asking me for a favor? I think so. Even though it was unbelievable, the adjutant was still suppressed by the words, "That is my life," until now. Who could ask the devil to ask someone for a favor? It was hard to imagine that such words would come out of the devil's mouth. However, it was precisely because of this. He and the old general would understand the significance of number 10 to him. Send the name list. The old general put down his cup, his gaze a little heavy. The day after tomorrow seemed to have been decided. Even he was just cooperating with the work on this mission. No one could predict how dangerous it would be. Most of the people who came had a rough idea. The stricter the selection, the more unpredictable it was. In fact, after today's incident, there were already 2 people with psychological problems. They were indeed the best of the best in the military, and they were also very brave. However, the quality of their sleep would directly reflect the situation. The doctor had already marked a cross on the psychological aspect. This mission didn't only require physical conditions, but also psychological endurance. After all, the other party had a psychological hypnotist. That would be the real nightmare. The military didn't slack off in their training. Even if they completed a rescue mission, they still had to do what they had to do. The further they went, the more intense the selection became. Basically, everyone was covered in mud. Perhaps it was because of the rumors or the exhaustion from the training, but one of the new recruits suddenly stood up during the break. He looked towards Bojio. Do you dare to compete? During the mission, the new recruit was at the periphery and wasn't sure what was going on. Chapter 1169. Bojio wiped the sweat off her chin when she was called. She glanced up, her gaze deep. Prince was in the same dormitory as Bojio and they were in the same team. Moreover, they had been together for such a long time. He knew Bojio's performance better than anyone else. Now, someone said that she had relied on her connections to get her position. That was so frustrating. Prince wanted to stand up for her. After all, he came from the military and had a fiery temper. He hadn't expected someone to interrupt him. What do you want to compete in? It was Bojio. She stood up with one hand stuffed into her pocket and the other hand behind her back, wiping the last drop of sweat off her chin. Her tone was calm. No one in the military would be too harsh. Someone had suggested this challenge because he was responsible for the mission. He knew how hard it was to become a technical soldier, but he had to be someone worthy of their protection. You pick. That was the recruit's reply. Bojio glanced up. I'm fine with anything. Then let's not compete in a single match. After today's training we'll meet in the jungle. According to the international jungle rules, regardless of the method, the one who explodes first wins. It was rare for a recruit to have such a challenge. That recruit also knew that according to the previous rumors, it was their technical soldiers who had destroyed the opposing team. But the others didn't know that there was a sniper among them. If there hadn't been an outstanding sniper, number 10 wouldn't have been able to infiltrate the enemy camp. They were the last to be sacrificed. From the start to the end, they hadn't seen number 10. The reason why they chose the jungle challenge was to tell the recruit that if the technical soldier was too weak during an overseas mission, he would be a burden to the entire operation team. Bojio understood what he meant. She drank a mouthful of water and replied, "Okay." Prince opened his mouth. He wanted to tell Bojio that this was the recruit with the highest qualities in Team 2. His sniping and concealment skills were top-notch. She should consider before agreeing. But on second thought, if he was in her shoes, he would have accepted the challenge too. "But, brother, tell me the truth. What exactly is your relationship with the devil? Was it really as the rumors said?" The military didn't allow such special feelings. Two men. Even if they weren't in the military, it wasn't possible. If this was true, even the great devil would have to be demoted in rank. Even though she hadn't been in the military, she knew the logic behind it. She smiled. "What do you think our relationship is?" This question made Prince choke. What should he say? *CK. Just as Prince's face turned green, Bojio opened her mouth again, her tone leisurely. Family members?" Prince's eyes widened. What do you mean?" Holy *T, he was even stuttering. It was mainly because this word was too misleading. Bojio arched a brow and pointed at herself. "I'm handsome, right? Captain is handsome too. It's easy to tell." "Prince, are you praising yourself or answering my question? Don't tell me you're brothers." Prince chuckled. Bojio turned nonchalant. "Congratulations, you got it right. But we aren't blood-related, we're cousins." "Cousins?" Prince felt that something was amiss. "Then why did you suppress the devil that day?" Bojio arched a brow. "I just wanted to ask my brother to not tell anyone about our relationship so that the people here wouldn't have any ill feelings towards me. We are all new soldiers and I don't know how to fold my blanket. It's embarrassing. Don't you want people to know that your uncle is our old general?" Bojio raised her eyebrows. Prince found the first half reasonable, but when he heard the last sentence, his expression darkened. He pointed at Bojio. You. *CK, how did she know? That didn't make sense." Bojio took another sip of water, a devilish smile on her face. "So, you believe me now? Tell me how you know my identity first." Prince thought to himself. Wasn't his disguise good enough? He hadn't even interacted with his uncle before. Bojio replied slowly, "I'll find out if I want to." "Youngster, you're still too naive. It's something that can be settled with a computer, how can it be so troublesome?" Prince was stunned. He held onto Lin Fan's hand. "Brother, please don't tell anyone about this. I really want to join the army." "Sure." Bojio placed the water down. "Tell me your conditions." Prince glared. Another F*King condition? Why did he join the military instead of being a robber? "Tell me, what are your conditions?" Prince was behaving like a little wife. Bojio pointed at her phone. "I was warned by my captain that if I use my phone again, he'll kick me out of the military. Think of a way to get me a phone." "We can't contact anyone in the military." Prince had his principles. "Oh," Bojio replied. "Then I'll go talk to my roommates about your family background." *CK. Prince reached out and pulled her back. "Promise me that you won't include any pictures in your messages and the topic can't be related to the military. Also, you can't describe the situation here." Bojio looked at him. "Do you think I'm committing treason? Of course I wouldn't do such a thing. I'm just sending a message to my teammates." "Teammates?" Prince was dumbfounded. "Do you miss your army unit?" Bojio glanced up at the sky. She felt that she had to hide her identity since there was a video online of her admitting to being a girl. Even though the military wouldn't be able to see it since it was a sealed-off place, it was better to keep a low profile. "I miss it." Bojio's words were true. Sometimes, whenever she saw the computer and touched the keyboard, she would be reminded of that period of time. She would sit in the club with those people and beat them up. Sometimes she would flash into the blood pool to kill them. After killing them, they would leave with a chicken wing in their mouths and oil on their hands. At that time, Yao Yao would be sitting beside her, watching Coco and Feng Shang fight for the MVP. Bojio's gaze softened when she thought about it. Those eyes used to be dark and cold, but now they seemed to be reflecting something in them. Prince looked at the youngster and was reminded of his time in the military. At that time, he had been a cold and aloof military prince who was invincible in close combat. Why did he seem to have changed after coming to this military unit? This military unit was poisonous. Alright, I'll get one. Don't tell anyone about this. Prince left with his conditions. He was still thinking about how formidable his cousin was. The devil was already inhuman and now there was another cunning one. He wouldn't be afraid of any tricks when he carried out missions in the future. In terms of tricks, they weren't weak either. After Prince got his phone, they found a place that wouldn't be easily discovered. It was a strange place. In the forest near the training ground. Hurry up. That was Prince's original words. Bojo glanced at him. Don't use such misleading words. If someone passes by, they might think that I did something to you. Prince moved 3 meters away from the youngster. How could he forget about her reputation? Indeed, he had to maintain a distance. It wouldn't be good if others thought that he was gay. His uncle would definitely break his legs. Bojo tried to switch on the phone. It wasn't her own phone and she wasn't used to it. But it was still possible to investigate something or make a phone call to someone. F***CK, why did you download Lil P's livestream? What exactly are you doing? Bojo avoided his hand. Why are you so nervous? I'm just entertaining myself. Hurry up and take a walk. After the call, I still have to fight in the forest. I have to stand at a place where I can hear you. Prince was adamant about this. He wouldn't allow anything to go wrong with the phone he brought over. Bojo opened the live stream and entered a room. There were already many people inside. Fortunately, it hadn't started yet, which meant that she was on time. She wanted a phone because Yao Yao's competition was today, a solo live stream. That's right, a solo live stream. A solo match that would determine whether Supreme Alliance could qualify for the Asian Cup. Before this, Shui Yao Yao didn't even think that she would be in a competition like this. Shui Yao Yao was a newbie. Her opponent was 1-2. Even though they had the same starting point, their platform was different. YS was a famous team in Asia. Even their newbie was the center of attention. The number of fans on their official Weibo had already exceeded 6 digits. In comparison, the number of viewers on Shui Yao Yao's side was almost negligible. Such a solo match wouldn't go unnoticed. China and Country H each sent a commentator to explain the match online. But even so, all the procedures followed the international rules. This meant that it wasn't an ordinary solo match. Even though they were separated by the internet, they could still feel the tension in the room. Nervous? The netizen laughed. Our CK was still live streaming yesterday. He didn't seem nervous at all. The opponent should be nervous, haha. I heard it's a girl. A girl's ability is limited when it comes to gaming. Don't cry when you get killed. You don't understand. China likes to do such things. Even esports relies on one's face. Who knows how she got there? Get CK to be gentler when he attacks. That's how we show our might. He doesn't have to be gentle to win. You guys don't know how the Chinese chased after CK. It seems like the fans know who to support. Isn't it always the style of the Chinese? Aha, I'm going there to earn some money. There would always be comments during the live stream. Perhaps some people would find it strange. However, there were indeed some girls spamming the names of their idols crazily. They had completely forgotten that this was a battle between China and Country H. While they were cheering for CK, they didn't forget to say, even if they compete, they will only embarrass China. They won't be able to beat CK. I really don't understand why she's so strong. Her skills are terrible. Does she want to be famous? I don't know. Anyway, I'm here to see my CK. I feel that he has become cuter. It was in such a situation that it was possible. Shui Yao Yao sat in front of the computer, checking the mouse and keyboard one last time. Someone else said, Supreme Alliance is past its prime. That Spade Z dragged a bunch of people down and now he's leaving. If you ask me, Supreme Alliance deserves it. They didn't give us an explanation and just fired him. Since he's still in the team, let's see if we can still support him. Supreme Alliance has reached its limit. Otherwise, why would they let Shui Yao Yao compete? There's nothing special about her at all. Anyone who watched the live stream could basically see these comments. The club was filled with huge screens. It was more realistic. Lin Feng clenched his fists, coughing continuously. He wanted to rush over, but he knew that it was better to be quiet. What are you going to do? Yun, who tilted his head, probably worried that he wouldn't be able to control his temper. There were so many people waiting outside the club, waiting for news from Supreme Alliance. Regardless of what it was, it would be a scandal. Lin Feng turned his gaze deep. I'm going to smoke. That's right, he could only smoke at this moment. I'm worried that Yao Yao will collapse. He had been scolded before. In esports, if you played well, people would praise you. Wow, what an amazing almighty. If you didn't play well, people would say how old you were and that you should retire as soon as possible. How embarrassing. In reality, they wanted to win more than anyone else. Lin Feng couldn't forget that year when their captain wasn't around. Because he couldn't adjust his mentality after one mistake, he had made a series of mistakes. In the end, he couldn't even see the comments on the screen. Because he had lost. As long as you lost, there was no meaning in a competition. Lin Feng stood in the corridor, his hands trembling when he lit his cigarette. Yun, who walked over, lowered his head and touched the cigarette he had lit. Then he leaned against the wall like him. Sometimes you underestimate a girl's tenacity. They are braver than us in certain aspects. It was rare for Yun-Hu to say so many words. Lin Feng smoked, not saying a word. Both of them knew that whoever sat in that room would have to bear this pressure. Professional esports players only looked glamorous on the surface. There was 1 minute left before the game would start. The players had a chance to speak to the team. Many people thought that Yun-Hu In Wuyao or Feng Yi would be the one guiding Yao Yao's tactics. But at this moment, Feng Yi stood up, gesturing to the other side to pause the call. Then he connected the call. When he was doing this, he was still dressed in a suit, looking like an ace manager. Just as everyone was still confused about what was happening, a voice suddenly came from beside her ear. Suddenly she heard a voice. It was the voice of a teenager, with a hint of laziness but as clear as water. It calmed Shui Yao Yao's racing heart. Yao Yao. Chapter 1170. Spadesy. Almost all of Spadesy's fans could tell whose voice it was. Ever since that incident, no one had seen her again. Those who truly liked Spadesy didn't care if the youngster was a man or a woman. The reason they had fallen in love with Spadesy was because she had broken so many things. Before this, many people would say that only those who had undergone training were fit to play professionally. Many people didn't care about the truly skilled streamers because they were just for entertainment. Those who came from unorthodox ways wouldn't be acknowledged. But Spadesy had rushed out from the crowd. Why was she liked? Because when they watched her play, they would think of themselves. In the past, when they had just started playing, they hadn't known anything. They had even foolishly gotten excited when they had killed the first person. They were all the same ordinary players. But in Spadesy, they saw the dream that they had wanted to have but didn't dare to have. One day I will become a professional gamer. This was a level that anyone who liked to play games wanted to reach. They had watched as Spadesy took the FC in Zone C again and again, breaking new records time and time again. Then she went to the qualifiers, the city-level competition, the revival competition, and the National League. They had been there for every competition. They had watched as that person charged into the blood pool alone, watched as that person was splashed with coke, watched as that person lost and won again. Many of them had forgotten that if it hadn't been for this youngster, Supreme Alliance wouldn't have reached this stage. The almighty Z they liked was a girl. So what? She was still herself, the one who had always broken the rules, telling everyone that when choosing a profession, one shouldn't decide if it was suitable based on one's background. FC King. The moment these 3 words appeared, Spadesy's fans seemed to have a tacit understanding as they started to flood the screen. They were all calling the same name, Almighty Z. It wasn't the big Spade from before, it was Almighty Z. I miss you, come back. Honestly, without Spadesy, the competition isn't as thrilling as it used to be. Indeed. Of course there were people who would scold her. There were people who told Bojio to scram, saying that she wasn't fit to appear and that she shouldn't be a burden to Supreme Alliance. However, the young man didn't seem to notice any of this. Shui Yao Yao, who was wearing headphones, paused. She could only feel her face getting a little hot from excitement. If there weren't so many spectators watching, she would definitely ask where Highness Jio was now, why he didn't even go to school, and why he couldn't find him with his phone turned off. But it was not the right time to ask. The person on the other end of the line didn't wait for her to speak, his voice as usual. Before the glory, we have to accept the embarrassment and difficulties in front of us. Only then will some people know that Supreme Alliance doesn't just have Qin Mo, Rao Rong, Yun-Hu, In Wuyao, and Yu Yao Yao. The final landing spot made Shui Yao Yao's heart skip a beat. Lin Feng and Yun-Hu couldn't help but laugh when they heard the commotion. At this moment, Bojio asked, "Are you ready?" Shui Yao Yao's eyes were red, but she smiled and agreed. Then let's go. It was just like what the Almighty would say at the start of every match. Now that Bojio had said it, it was calm but it wasn't easy. It was enough to make one forget everything else and focus on the outcome. He had to win the match. Yes, he had to win. The call ended. In an instant, only the sound of Shui Yaoyao logging into the game could be heard. On the other side, CK seemed to be sloppy, interacting with his fans nonchalantly. But he was a professional after all. Before this, he had seen the information of Supreme Alliance's contestant. Frankly speaking, she was just slightly better than ordinary players. Her hand speed was fast, but esports wasn't all about hand speed, it was more about awareness and control. Moreover, she had played as a sorcerer and was more of an auxiliary player. Her understanding of the character wasn't as good as his. CK entered the game, he had already thought of a strategy. He would press the line and crush the opponent, it wasn't a problem at all. It seems like both parties have chosen their characters. The shoutcaster started to synchronize. When he saw the screen, he revealed a shocked expression. Supreme Alliance's contestant has chosen an auxiliary character. It seems like the competition system has weakened her considerably. She doesn't even understand the character? The other shoutcaster shook his head. It's too dangerous. There was a huge disparity in their skills and now she had chosen a weakened character. Could she still fight? CK lifted the corners of his lips when he saw Shui Yaoyao's character. His eyes filled with mockery. A third-rate player was indeed a third-rate player. 5 minutes. When he typed these words, the others didn't understand what he meant. CK's fans were already spamming the screen crazily. He's so handsome, my idol. Can it end in 5 minutes? Cool. CK won't even need 5 minutes to beat her. It's a one-sided abuse. This competition isn't interesting. This wasn't an official competition, it was just a solo. CK didn't have to worry about the situation. Their captain had reminded him. But everyone knew that in the Asian season, their results were obvious to all. It wasn't a big deal to be impudent at this moment. CK thought about it, moving his mouse to clear the players. Both of them chose the middle lane? That's how solo matches are. Let's see who gets the first kill. Solo matches were basically decided by the first kill. Both of them were playing as auxiliary characters, their tempo wasn't that fast. But CK said that it would end in 5 minutes. It might really end in 5 minutes. The shoutcaster looked at the situation on the screen. They are being suppressed. CK's positioning and dodging are outstanding, the outcome is obvious. But watching two auxiliary players in a solo match wasn't as satisfying as watching an assassin. It was obvious that CK was much faster than Shui Yaoyao. Not only that, Shui Yaoyao had been hit and her HP had dropped. Her positioning is too slow. I really don't understand how she managed to become a professional player. I say, you guys already know the outcome, why are you so bothered? Shui Yaoyao moved her mouse as though she hadn't noticed her mistake, turning her body to attack the minions. Just like that, the match was so peaceful that it made people feel bored. The shoutcaster could only give a simple explanation. Let's take a look at the matchup between the two sides. If nothing out of the ordinary happens, both of them have chosen to face each other in the middle lane. But it's obvious that compared to CK's mechanics, our beautiful Yaoyao's movements seem a little fatigued. In such a situation, she can only clear the minions at the bottom of the tower. Honestly speaking, this doesn't look like a solo match at all. Luckily, their finances aren't that different. Their finances aren't that different, right? It looks like CK is suppressing her. That's why I find it weird. I can only say that this girl is tenacious. God, CK should have jumped the tower and killed her. I think so too, probably because the equipment isn't out yet. Let's wait a little longer. But there was a problem. Some viewers who were watching the live stream realized this. That was time. Why does it feel like a long time has passed? It's been 4 minutes, right? God, CK isn't that slow usually. It is. 5 minutes later. People started to re-evaluate the match. They couldn't bring up the pace. What was going on? Even CK furrowed his brows, holding onto the mouse with one hand. He wasn't in a good mood since he hadn't expected it to be so slow. Yaoyao's support character especially chosen to counter CK's expertise. Rao Rong looked at the match on the screen and suddenly laughed. He was as calm as the wind, his voice faint. Our sister Yaoyao's tactics are interesting? Lin Feng arched a brow. You like it? Even if you do, it won't be yours. Shut up, almighty Lin Feng. Take a look at your recovery. You need to use your brain when playing games. Rao Rong's voice and his words were completely different. Lin Feng's eyes widened. This person had only joined their team for a few days and he was already in this state? Moreover, it felt good to be called Almighty Lin Feng by the Almighty. The naive girl automatically ignored his mocking tone. And not just use your brain, Feng Shang spoke up, his face flushed adorably as he stuttered. Feng Shang spoke up, his face blushing adorably as he stuttered. Yao Yao, in order to practice her support, she spent a lot of time. She had watched so many videos and analyzed so many skills. She had even created a table specifically for each character's skills. And that person? CK, which support was his expertise. He woke up earlier than everyone else and slept later than everyone else. Even Feng Shang couldn't count how many times he had seen Yao Yao sleeping on the chair in the internet cafe after the National League. She would always have to wait for Uncle Ian to wake her up before she would pat her face and head to the washroom to wash her face before returning to her seat to continue her research. Countless battles and manipulations of skills. The club also had to train, but with the intensity of the training, even he wouldn't be able to endure it. Yao Yao really wanted to win. Regarding the solo match, Feng Shang lifted his head, looking at the character on the screen. CK was obviously getting impatient. He waved his mouse, intending to launch his strongest attack. Even as a support, there was damage output. Moreover, his support was a tank. He had a natural advantage and could push forward with his minions. It was obvious that Yao Yao was at a disadvantage, especially with her low HP. It wasn't safe for her to stand at the bottom of the tower. The sound of CK clicking his mouse sped up. The two commentators who were watching the match from God's perspective pressed down on their headphones, straightening their backs. It's coming? Chapter 1171. What is CK trying to do? People looked at the movements in the video and leaned closer to the computer screen. The expressions on their faces showed how excited they were. CK can't be. Tower kill? Even Feng Shang couldn't sit still, standing up abruptly. CK's character had already entered the tower. Using the advantage of the minions, he dealt damage to Shui Yao Yao and slowed her down with a skill. He won. This was the prediction of the netizens. Almost all of CK's fans were there. But in the next second, flash. The shoutcaster's voice came from the earpiece. Shui Yao Yao's movement is very clever. But it didn't seem to be of any use. CK had already walked to the middle of the two towers, meaning that he was going to kill her. CK didn't want to drag it any longer. 5 minutes had passed and he couldn't even defeat a girl. It would be a humiliation to him if word got out. Moreover, this girl was just an online gamer. How could an ordinary gamer compare to him? Yao Yao, run. The instant the bullet screen popped up, Shui Yao Yao turned around. Shui Yao Yao turned around and used her ultimate move. That's right, big move. Marked damage and had a speed reduction function. This was the highlight of Shui Yao Yao's support skill. At the start of the match, the shoutcaster was right. This character had been weakened in this season. But it wasn't that she couldn't fight. CK was a support, so he wasn't afraid of slow damage. It was just that the speed reduction was troublesome. He frowned, leaning to the left, waiting for the skill to recover. But at this time, the support that he had been chasing for some reason just now accelerated and rushed towards him. Courting death? CK tapped with his finger, wanting to continue his attack. But at this moment he realized that he was out of mana and only had one skill left. CK. CK hurriedly retreated. But he had used up his flash when he was chasing after the person. At that time he had thought that he could kill her. But he had only forced her to use her flash. CK's right hand slid the mouse. His position was too unfavorable, in the middle of the two towers. If he leaned a little he would be attacked by the tower. Even as a support, CK didn't have enough HP. But if he didn't, he would fall into the opponent's big move. In less than 3 seconds, CK chose to avoid the delayed critical strike of the electric circle skill. He was unavoidably hit by the tower twice, leaving him with only a little HP. CK turned around and entered the bushes at the side. He planned to leave through the river. This way he would definitely disappear from the enemy's attack range. At this point, everyone was well aware of the opponent's mana consumption. He was out of mana and couldn't recover his skills. Even if his opponent had mana, she wouldn't be much better off. At most, she would be a little stronger than him. With that support, what else could she do without her ultimate skills? CK floated through the grass, Shui Yao Yao chasing after him. This girl is really stupid. Doesn't she know that she can't chase after the support tank? Maybe it's because I want to kill too much. I'm like that sometimes too, and this is a rare opportunity. I don't have enough critical hits and I don't have any ultimate moves. I can't kill it. The shoutcasters thought so too. Moreover, when Shui Yaoyao was chasing, she didn't even hit the target because she lost her vision. It was even more impossible. If she continued to chase, she might get into trouble. Chapter 1172. Feng Shang clenched his fists anxiously. Lin Feng lifted the corners of his lips, turning towards Yun Hu. Do you think Sister Yao is going to? Before Lin Feng could finish his sentence, Shui Yaoyao sped up, moving behind the wall. She didn't throw the skill towards the bushes, instead she flattened the tyrant. CK, who had intended to counterattack, was about to make his move when Shui Yaoyao flattened him. The tyrant leaped up, pulling all the aggro onto CK through the wall. With a swipe of its claws, CK was sent flying. Yaoyao was indeed out of mana, but she didn't need any more skills. She just needed a click of the mouse. A crisp sound rang out. Go. First kill. The competition was won. Almost everyone looked at this scene in disbelief. The shoutcaster was speechless. Not to mention CK himself, he was completely dumbfounded. Tyrant, she actually used the tyrant. That move is awesome. Big Spade must have used that move before. It's a familiar scene, let's feel sorry for CK. Almighty Z isn't around, but her skills are still there. Even though she's handsome, she's really sinister, too sinister. The pop-up messages lit up the screen in an instant. Someone even sent her a plane. Shui Yaoyao sat there watching the word victory appear on the screen. Only then did she feel that she had won, her palms sweating as she held onto the mouse. The team members behind her had already rushed over. Lin Feng pressed his hand on her head. Yaoyao, you've become sinister, you're drawing aggro like little blackhead. But it's fine, our team is the most sinister team, haha. The audience in front of the computer. They had never seen someone insult their own team so much, their hearts aching for Almighty Yun. Coco's way of expressing his joy was the most direct, reaching out to carry Shui Yaoyao, almost kissing her as though she was his rabbit. Fortunately, Feng Shang grabbed his hand. What are you doing? Yaoyao is a girl. I forgot in excitement, why are you so nervous? Coco paused, realizing that the person in his arms was a little soft. He let go, smiling cutely. Yaoyao, we won. Yes, he had won. He could finally represent Huaxia. This time they finally persevered to the end. Shui Yaoyao was also very happy, her face red. Was it because she was too young that there was no difference between a man and a woman at this moment? Everyone wanted to give Shui Yaoyao a hug. What exactly was he insisting on? It was probably because he didn't want to let go of any opportunity. Even if there were rumors everywhere, he still wanted to move forward towards what he wanted. Everyone was cheering. On CK's side, his face had turned green. It was obvious that he wasn't satisfied with this match, but a match was a match. In a solo, it was always about the first drop of blood. However, CK was not a petty opponent. He only left a message on the screen, "See you at the Asian Cup." The commentator was still explaining the review of the match when the people on the other side had already gone offline. A portion of the fans had also turned off their computers. Even though many people thought that Shui Yaoyao's victory was just a fluke. But that didn't affect Supreme Alliance's celebration. Feng Yi walked over, raising his hand to check the time on his watch. I still have a meeting, think about what to eat tonight, let's have a good celebration. They had obtained the qualification for the Asian Cup, but they weren't sure if that person would be back. And Little Spade, Feng Yi was a secretive person, he wouldn't reveal things easily. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.